I've been stuck in this middle-of-nowhere wilderness for 2 days now. No people, no roads, nothing. Just endless mountains and forests. I'm a soldier who got separated during a training exercise, and I lost my gun somewhere along the way. The missions failed, but I don't care about that anymore. I just need to get back alive. The strangest thing about this place is a wildcat I picked up along the way. I named him Little Tiger, and he's no ordinary cat. He's fat, golden-furred, and almost scarily smart. He copies what I do, spots things before I can even see them, and once chased down a wild boar by blocking its path over and over until the thing panicked and killed itself running into a tree. Then the cat looked at me like he expected me to skin it and cook it for him, which I did. And then he ate half the whole boar by himself. This forest is weird too. It's massive and wild enough to be full of dangerous predators, but all I've seen are rabbits, deer, snakes, and one gray wolf. Back at my military base, leopards and big cats were everywhere. Here, nothing. It doesn't make sense. This morning I shot a rabbit with a makeshift bow, roasted it over a fire, and Little Tiger stole most of my meal. Literally poking the meat with a stick he broke off a tree. I can't even be mad. He's good company out here. My plan now is to climb the tallest peak I can see by noon and try to figure out where I am. Just wandering over mountain after mountain isn't going to get me home. I was climbing toward the mountaintop with Little Tiger on my shoulder, actually enjoying the scenery for once. The view was beautiful, misty mountains, green forests, sunlight everywhere. Near the peak, the trees thinned out and gave way to bare rock formations. I spotted a dark cave at the base of the stone peak and moved closer to check it out. That's when a deafening roar exploded from inside. I reacted on instinct, leaping up the nearest tree with Little Tiger. A white blur shot out of the cave and stopped below me. When I got a clear look, my blood ran cold. It was a white tiger, bigger than a bull. I gripped my bayonet and locked eyes with it. The tiger sensed danger too, but strangely, it seemed more wary of Little Tiger than of me. The standoff lasted only a moment before the tiger launched at me. I kicked off the tree and dove under it, aiming to slice open its belly. But the blade barely cut half a finger deep. Its hide was like iron. We traded blows midair. I managed to stab through the soft spot behind its front leg, and when it stumbled on landing, I jumped on its back and drove the bayonet into its neck. I punched its eye with my free hand, screaming like a maniac. But the tiger rolled and threw me off, then whipped me with its tail so hard I heard my ribs crack. I flew several meters and hit the ground unable to stand. When I looked up, Little Tiger was standing between me and the bleeding, half-blind tiger, staring it down. That little cat was actually holding off a raging white tiger for me. I couldn't believe it. I gathered every last bit of strength. The tiger charged one final time, its massive jaws wide open. Just as I was about to strike, a gray flash shot from behind me and flew straight into the tiger's mouth. In that same instant, I drove my bayonet deep into its exposed throat with everything I had. The blade sank in completely. The tiger flew over me and crashed to the ground, blood pouring from its mouth. Dead. All I could say was one word. And then I remembered something and spun around to look behind me. I spun around and saw a young man kneeling on the ground, crying hard. He was wearing animal skin armor and holding a wooden bow. My first thought was pure relief. Finally, a living person after 2 days alone. But before I could speak, something impossible happened. A ball of white light floated up from the dead tiger's body. Little Tiger leaped at it, but missed, and the light shot straight into my forehead. I couldn't move or speak. The light sank into my body, and I felt a warm, powerful energy spread through me. My broken ribs started healing on their own. Within moments, I was completely fine. No pain, no injuries, nothing. I turned to the young hunter and thanked him for the arrow he'd shot into the tiger's mouth during the fight. Then I asked the most important question, where am I? He called it the Lisha mountain range, on a mountain called Trap Tiger Mountain. I asked if this was Yunnan province. He'd never heard of it. I asked about China. He shook his head. He said this was the kingdom of Shinda. I went through every country I could think of, America, Russia, Japan. Nothing. He'd never heard of any of them. He mentioned kings and ministers, and his clothes looked ancient. My mind raced through every possibility until I landed on the one I didn't want to accept. I'd crossed into another world entirely. The strange wilderness, Little Tiger's impossible abilities, the white light from the tiger, it all pointed the same way. I forced myself to calm down. As a special forces soldier, adapting to any environment was part of my training. I put on a friendly face and told the hunter I was just a fellow huntsman who'd gotten lost. He bought it. Turns out the white tiger had been terrorizing his village for years and had killed his father, so he was grateful I'd helped kill it. He offered to take me back to his village. Their village chief, an old man named Lude, had traveled widely and might know something about where I came from. That was the best lead I had, so I gladly accepted. On the way down the mountain, the hunter told me his name was Torsy, from a village called Sunset Village. He was an orphan. His mother died giving birth to him, and his father was killed by that same white tiger years ago. He'd always wanted revenge, but was never strong enough. Today he happened to hear the roar while hunting nearby, and came running, arriving just in time to help me finish the beast off. Torsy told me about this world. The continent is called Kale, and we're in the kingdom of Shinda on its western side. It's a fantasy world with warriors, hunters, mages, priests, dwarves, elves, beastmen, magical monsters, and even ancient dragons. Everything runs on cold weapons, no guns, no technology. The more I heard, the more my heart sank. This place has nothing in common with Earth. I glanced at little Tiger dozing on my shoulder and silently cursed him for bringing me here. At the foot of the mountain, a group came to meet us. Ursi's hunting partners Zika and Jelu, and the village chief, a weathered old man named Lude who was missing one arm. When they saw the tiger's body, everyone went wild with excitement. Back at the village, the whole community gathered in Ursi's courtyard. Ursi told the story of our fight, making me sound like a hero. He introduced me and asked if anyone had heard of a place called China. Everyone shook their heads. That confirmed it. I was truly in another world with no clear way home. Ursi offered to let me stay at his house. I had no better option, so I accepted. The village chief told us to keep the tiger since we killed it, and Ursi suggested making me armor from the white tiger's hide so I'd blend in better. Good idea. My camouflage uniform was drawing too many stares. His house was simple but clean. A main hall with a table and chairs, animal hides and bows on the walls, 2 bedrooms on the right, a storage room and kitchen on the left. He gave me the west bedroom with a bed, a desk, and a chair. Nothing fancy, but enough. I looked out at the mountains stretching into the distance and told myself, new world, new life. At least I had this lazy cat to keep me company. I was just about to thank Ursi when a woman's scream cut through the air from outside. The scream turned out to be nothing dangerous. A girl named Mia had walked into the courtyard and got scared by the tiger's body lying there. She was a pretty girl, black hair tied in a ponytail with a red ribbon, bright eyes, small nose, and a cute face. It was obvious from the way Ursi grabbed her hand and fussed over her that he had feelings for her. I couldn't help teasing him about it, which made him grin like an idiot. We got to work skinning the tiger, but Ursi's knife couldn't cut through the hide at all. I tried his knife too. Same result, just a shallow scratch. But when I used my bayonet, it sliced right through. The bayonet's military-grade steel was far beyond anything in this world. Ursi stared at it with wide eyes. We got the skin off and hung it up to dry. Mia cooked us a meal, and it was delicious. Little Tiger, of course, made a scene, jumping onto a plate, pointing at the meat, then rubbing his belly. Mia thought he was adorable and started feeding him on her lap. The shameless cat even pointed at different dishes and nodded at her to get more. Everyone laughed hard at that. After eating, I had an idea. Everyone in this village hunts with bows, and if I'm going to live here, I need one too. The tiger's bones and tendons would make perfect materials. If the hide was that tough, the bones and sinews would be even better. I spent the whole afternoon crafting a bow from the white tiger's bones and stringing it with tiger tendon. It turned out great, solid, elegant, and powerful looking. Ursi was impressed and immediately grabbed his arrow quiver so we could test it out. I tested the bone bow with one of Ursi's arrows. The arrows were well made, smooth bamboo with iron tips, but they had no feathers on the tail end, which would hurt their speed and accuracy. I didn't mention it yet, though, because I had a bigger surprise coming. When I tried to pull the bow, it barely moved. I kept adding force until suddenly a warm energy rose from my belly and flowed through my whole body into the bow. It felt incredible, a massive power wrapping around me. The bow bent into a full moon shape, and I released. The arrow vanished like a bolt of lightning into the sky. After the shot, The energy drained away and I felt exhausted, but I was thrilled. Torsy tried pulling it next but couldn't budge it at all, no matter how hard he strained. I figured the white light I absorbed from the tiger must resonate with the bow since it's made from the same tiger's bones and tendons. Luckily, after a night's sleep, the energy always came back fully restored, and it even seemed to grow stronger over time with exercise. Days passed. I organized Torsy, Zika, Jelu, and the other young hunters into a training group. Morning runs around the village, combat basics, and archery practice. They improved steadily but couldn't hit much at 50 meters. That's when I brought up the arrow problem. None of them had ever heard of fletching, adding feathers to arrows. This world's technology was even more behind than I'd thought. I shot down a hawk circling overhead, plucked its tail feathers, and tied them to a few bamboo arrows. Then I handed one to Jelu and told him to try. He didn't believe feathers would help, but he aimed and shot. The arrow flew straight and stuck dead center in the wooden post. He shot again, same result. He started laughing like crazy. The other hunters rushed over wanting to try, and soon everyone was hitting targets they'd never been able to hit before. Some of them ran into the village to spread the news. Others scattered across the hills hunting hawks for more feathers. I watched them go inside. Those poor hawks had been living peacefully because their meat tasted terrible and nobody bothered with them. That was about to change. I spent a lot of my free time visiting village chief Isekai'd and other elderly villagers, listening to their stories about the continent, old battles, encounters with demons, adventures from their youth. I always enjoyed it, and they treated me like one of their own children. Through them, I learned a great deal about this world. Torsy often came along and would always say on the way home, "One day I'll become a ranger that everyone on the continent respects." I'd learned by now that a ranger was an incredibly powerful existence here, not just some horseback tourist. Hearing all these stories, I quietly made up my own mind too. Since I'm stuck in this world, I want to become something great. Meanwhile, little Tiger completely abandoned me for Mia. He followed her everywhere, even tried helping in the kitchen, mostly making things worse, like eating half a plate of meat before it reached the table or adding salt to dishes on his own. He even slept in her bed, which drove Torsy crazy. Typical, the ungrateful cat forgot all about me the moment a pretty girl showed up. One evening, Isekai'd called me to the village entrance. He looked out at the sunset over the mountains and told me plainly, I was an eagle, and this small village had no sky for me to spread my wings. He was right. I could never settle down here forever. But he also asked me, gently, to leave Torsy and Mia in peace, to let them live safe, simple lives together. I understood completely. My own parents had worried the same way when I joined the military. 3 days later was Torsy and Mia's wedding. The whole village celebrated in Torsy's courtyard. The young hunters chased Torsy around forcing drinks on him until he was singing and dancing like a fool. I joined in the chaos, laughing, drinking, having a great time. Then I made a mistake. After Torsy was finished, I was still standing there laughing with a wine jug in my hand. The crowd went quiet. I noticed everyone staring at me with strange expressions, especially Zika and Jelu, who looked at me the way a wolf eyes a rabbit. Before I could react, Zika shouted, "Get him! Don't let him escape." They turned on me next. I woke up the morning after the wedding with no memory of the night before. They'd gotten me good with the drinking. Jelu was sprawled next to me with his foot on my stomach. I got up, felt the cool morning breeze, and knew it was time to go. I'd already made up my mind to leave after the wedding. Torsy was married now. The village was safe with the tiger gone, and there was nothing left holding me here. I put on my old camouflage uniform with the white tiger hide armor over it, grabbed my bone bow, and walked outside. Village Chief Isekai'd was already waiting in the courtyard, smoking his pipe. He wasn't surprised. He handed me 2 gifts, a detailed wolfskin map of the kingdom of Shinda that he'd drawn years ago, and a ring called the Spirit Monkey Ring, carved with strange symbols. He said it would make me faster and more agile. In return, I gave him an empty bullet casing to pass along to Torsy as a keepsake. I saluted the 2 old men and walked away without looking back. Just past the village entrance, a familiar meow rang out and little Tiger landed on my shoulder. The lazy cat had been kicked out of Mia's bed, apparently. I laughed and told him we were heading to Torsy City. From everything the village elders had told me, Torsy City was the place I wanted to be. It sits on the border between Shinda and the powerful Gongqin Nation, near the dangerous Dragon Fog Mountains full of magical beasts and crystal mines. The city grew from a tiny village into a booming hub because adventurers and mercenaries kept pouring in to explore those mountains. It has mercenary guilds, craftsmen, merchants, and is governed by whichever mercenary group wins a competition held every 5 years. The journey would normally take half a month, but with the mysterious energy in my body and the agility Ring Lude gave me, I could run at incredible speed. Little Tiger and I tore through the mountain ranges, hunting and camping along the way. For a trained soldier and a supernatural cat, roughing it in the wild was nothing new. The journey through the mountains went smoothly for the most part. It was autumn, so the nights were full of mosquitoes, but I found plants that looked like mugwort and burned them over the fire as insect repellent. Worked just as well as back on Earth. Any wild animals that crossed my path were dealt with quickly, and some of them ended up as dinner. Around noon one day, I reached a beautiful little lake with crystal clear water that tasted sweet and cool. I drank until my belly was full, and even Little Tiger copied me, gulping down huge mouthfuls. The scenery was so gorgeous I couldn't resist. I stripped down and jumped straight in for a proper bath. I figured the cat would just sit on the shore watching, but no, the little show-off dove in after me and started swimming around like it was nothing. A cat that swims. This world never stops surprising me. After we cleaned off days of sweat and grime, I climbed out, got dressed, and checked the map. We were already in the Liji mountain range. Just a few more peaks, and we'd be able to see Torsy city. I was feeling great about our progress when I caught movement at the edge of my vision. A massive wolf with deep blue fur had appeared at the lake's edge without making a sound. I grabbed my bone bow, but before I could even knock an arrow, the wolf opened its mouth and launched a crescent-shaped blade of wind straight at me. I snatched Little Tiger and rolled sideways just in time, firing an arrow back at the wolf as I dodged. The beast sidestepped it effortlessly, then sent 3 more wind blades screaming toward me in rapid succession. This was the first time I'd actually faced a magic-using beast. I'd heard about them plenty from the village elders, but hearing about it and experiencing it are completely different things. I jumped straight up. My strength had grown so much that I cleared over 3 meters, and all 3 wind blades sliced through empty air beneath my feet. I fired another arrow mid-air, aiming right for the wolf's open mouth, but the clever thing just snapped its jaws shut and dodged again. Arrows weren't going to work on something this fast and smart, so I hurled my bone bow at its head as a distraction and pulled out my bayonet. If range wasn't going to cut it, I'd take this fight up close. But the wolf was smarter than I expected. Instead of flinching from the thrown bow, it tilted its head to avoid it and lunged straight at me with its massive jaws wide open. I couldn't dodge in time. Its teeth clamped down on my waist. But instead of being torn apart, I just felt a heavy impact. The white tiger hide armor held. That armor saved my life right there. In that same instant, I drove the bayonet into the wolf's neck, and blood started spraying everywhere. Little Tiger was in the fight too. Somehow the little maniac had landed on top of the wolf's head and ripped off most of its ear in one savage bite. The wolf howled in agony and reflexively launched another wind blade, the strongest one yet, aimed right at my face. But I was already moving. The moment I saw its mouth opening, I ducked low and reversed my grip on the bayonet, stabbing it deep into the wolf's chest and dragging the blade downward with both hands. The wolf's belly split wide open. Hot blood splattered across my face. I roared, wound up my fist, and hammered it into the wolf's skull with everything I had. The wolf flew sideways and crashed to the ground, dead before it could even whimper. I stood there shaking with adrenaline and couldn't help yelling out how incredible that felt. Little Tiger joined in with his usual awful howling, which immediately made me laugh and broke the tension. Once I calmed down, I thought about what just happened more seriously. Without the tiger hide armor, I'd be dead. These magic beasts are terrifyingly dangerous. They can hit you with spells in the middle of close combat, like someone pulling a gun during a fist fight. I needed to be much more careful going forward. And since wolves travel in packs, more could be nearby. I remembered the village elders saying that magic beasts above level 3 have crystal cores inside their bodies that are extremely valuable. This blue wolf was clearly powerful enough to qualify, so I cut it open and searched. Sure enough, I found a glowing blue gemstone near its heart, a magic beast crystal core. I turned it over in my hands, shook it, even tossed it in the air, but I couldn't figure out how its magic worked. Didn't matter though. I'd arrived in this world with no money at all, and this thing plus the wolf's beautiful blue pelt would be enough to fund my stay in Torsy City. I skinned the wolf, washed the blood off in the lake, grabbed my gear, and set off again with little Tiger on my shoulder. What should have been a half-month journey took me only 5 days of nonstop running. When I finally saw the massive walls of Torsy City rising up in the evening light, all the exhaustion just melted away. The place was everything I'd imagined and more. Huge stone walls, streams of people flowing in and out, civilians mixed with armored mercenaries carrying swords and axes. It felt like stepping into an ancient martial arts world, full of energy and noise and life. Back on Earth, I was a sniper, always hiding alone in the shadows waiting for the perfect shot. This was the complete opposite, loud, chaotic, and thrilling in a totally different way. I joined the crowd heading through the gates. Suddenly a figure in black came sprinting out from inside the city, running straight toward us at full speed. Everyone scattered to the sides. Right behind the black-clothed figure came something that stopped me in my tracks. A creature with the body of a huge man but the head of a bull, complete with 2 curved black horns on top. He was wearing heavy gray-brown armor covered in metal spikes, carrying an enormous broadsword, and he was even taller than me by a full head. I'm over 6 feet tall, so this thing was massive. The village elders had told me about minotaurs, but hearing stories is nothing compared to seeing one charge past you in the flesh. I even caught a glimpse of a tail swinging behind him as he ran. Incredible. The crowd buzzed with curiosity and started following them outside the gates. I wasn't about to miss this either, my first real look at how people in this world fight. The thief in black was fast, pulling ahead once they cleared the gate. But the Minotaur, someone in the crowd called him Luda Bloodhoof, from a mercenary group called the Dite Corps, spread his arms wide and let out a thundering shout. His speed exploded forward instantly, closing the gap in a blink. The thief panicked and threw something that looked exactly like a grenade. My eyes went wide. They have explosives in this world? Luda casually swatted it aside with his sword, and when it hit the ground it actually detonated with a burst of fire. So they really had figured out some kind of gunpowder here. I'd underestimated this world's technology. Then Luda did something even more impressive. He jumped up and stomped the ground with tremendous force, and arcs of lightning spread outward across the earth in every direction. Someone in the crowd gasped and shouted, "Thunderstrike!" The lightning hit the thief and his movements immediately slowed to a crawl, like he was wading through thick mud. His body swayed, and he could barely move his feet. This was the first time I'd seen a person use a combat skill, not a magic beast, but an actual person channeling some kind of power. I locked my eyes on both of them and didn't blink, memorizing every detail. Luda stood there with his sword planted in the ground and started cursing the thief out, calling him an idiot for daring to rob him. The crowd had mixed reactions. Some were laughing and enjoying the show. Others seemed worried for the thief. I heard someone say that Luda never held back and the thief was in serious trouble. Another person whispered that if Luda kept talking, the stun effect would wear off and the thief could still escape. But Luda finished his rant and raised his massive broadsword high, aiming straight for the thief's arm. He was going to chop it clean off. Something in my gut reacted before my brain did. Cutting off someone's hand over a robbery felt wrong. Too brutal, too much. My body moved on its own. I drew my bow, knocked an arrow, and fired. The arrow slammed into the flat of the broadsword with a sharp metallic clang, knocking it sideways just enough to miss the thief completely. The crowd froze. Luda steadied his sword, looked around with fury burning in his eyes, and bellowed in that deep bull voice of his. "Who the hell is meddling in my business?" The reason I fired that arrow was simple. When Luda's massive sword came swinging down, the thief's face went completely white. He looked young, barely more than a teenager, shaking and terrified, eyes full of despair. Chopping off a kid's arm over some stolen coins was way too much. I couldn't just stand there and watch that happen, so I acted. But I'd just arrived at Torsy City. I hadn't even walked through the gates yet, and I really didn't want to make enemies this early. Still, what's done is done. I've never been the type to run from consequences. I stepped out of the crowd, kept my voice calm, and told the Minotaur he'd misunderstood. The kid was young, probably desperate, and it wasn't worth maiming him over money. I turned to point at the thief to make my case, and the spot was completely empty. The little bastard had bolted the moment the stun effect wore off while I was busy talking. I cursed him in my head. I stick my neck out to save him, and he uses me as a shield and runs. Luda saw the empty space too and burst out laughing. Then he said something I didn't expect. He didn't care about the thief anymore. He'd noticed my arrow had some real power behind it, and he wanted to fight me instead. If I won, I could walk away. If I lost, well, he didn't even want compensation since the thief hadn't actually gotten away with his money. He just wanted a good fight. Before I could even respond, his sword came crashing down. I barely got my bone bow up in time to block. The impact sent a numbing shock through my arms, and my hands ached from the vibration. The warriors in this world really are terrifyingly strong. He kept coming, side slashes, overhead chops, thrusts, sweeps, one after another without stopping. I didn't dare block head-on again, so I kept dodging and weaving, staying light on my feet. He actually complimented my footwork mid-fight, which would have been flattering if he wasn't trying to cut me in half. Then things got serious. He let out a battle cry, and his whole body lit up with a blue-green glow. The light crawled up his sword until the blade looked like it was on fire. Someone in the crowd gasped and said he was using battle chi. The burning sword came screaming toward me, tearing the air apart with crackling sounds. This was a whole different level of power. I watched the blade coming from my shoulder. At the last possible second, I twisted my body backward, letting the sword edge pass so close to my face I could feel it burning my skin. Before he could recover, I grabbed his sword wrist with one hand and hooked his armor collar with the other. I dropped my weight, swept my left leg back, and threw him over my shoulder in a textbook judo toss. But the big bull was faster than I expected. As he flew over my head, he swung a fist straight into my chest. I trusted the tiger hide armor to take the hit, braced my palm against my chest, and absorbed the punch. The impact sent both of us flying in opposite directions about 5 meters each. This time I was smarter. Before he could get up for another round, I jumped to my feet, clasped my fists together, and loudly announced that his strength was far beyond mine and I'd lost. I figured ending it with respect was better than dragging out a fight I might not win. Luda burst out laughing. He said it was the first time anyone had ever thrown him face first into the dirt, let alone a hunter. He wasn't angry at all. In fact, he seemed thrilled. His personality was exactly what I'd guessed. Rough, aggressive, but surprisingly easygoing underneath. He declared the fight over, said he'd only eaten half his dinner before chasing that thief, and grabbed my arm with his huge hoof hand to drag me into the city for drinks. I was starving anyway, so I stopped resisting and let him pull me along. He took me to the mercenary tavern inside the mercenary guild building. The place was buzzing with noise even in the afternoon. People drinking, arguing, laughing, trading stories. It would only get crazier after dark. What I didn't know was that across the tavern, 3 people were already watching us walk in. A young hunter named Gemini had seen our fight at the gate and rushed inside to tell his companions. A silver-armored warrior and a white-robed mage. Both well-dressed middle-aged men who carried themselves with quiet authority. Gemini told them a hunter had just beaten Luda Bloodhoof in a fight outside the gates. The warrior didn't believe it at first. Apparently hunters had such a bad reputation in this world that nobody had produced a ranger-class fighter from their ranks in decades. But the mage studied me as I walked in and said something interesting. If what Gemini said was true, I might be very useful for a plan they were working on. Luda dragged me to an empty table and immediately ordered 2 jugs of rum, the strong stuff from Treasure Bay, and 4 plates of roasted beef. The waiter clearly knew him well, and so did half the tavern. People kept calling out greetings to him, using the nickname Big Bull. One warrior named Barton even joked about the thief giving Luda trouble. Luda waved it off and boasted that I was so tough even Barton might not be able to beat me. Barton raised his glass to me with a friendly nod and drank it down. Once the food arrived, Luda introduced himself properly, Luda Bloodhoof of the Dite Mercenary Corps, and asked my name and rank. I told him I was Wang Feng, with no rank at all. I'd just come out of a small village, and this was my first time in Torsy City. He was shocked. He said without a rank badge, surviving in a mercenary city would be very difficult. Looking around the tavern, I could see what he meant. Everyone, humans, minotaurs, dwarves, beastmen, was fully armed and armored with all kinds of weapons I'd never seen before. And nearly all of them wore small badges on their chests, 1 or 2, sometimes 3 or 4. Those must be the rank badges Luda was talking about. If I wanted to fit into this world, getting one was clearly a priority. Luda offered me a spot in his mercenary group right then and there, saying if I could earn a high-level hunter badge, the hunter squad captain position would be mine for sure. I appreciated the offer, but turned it down. I'd just arrived, had no ties to anyone, and I liked being free to do whatever I wanted. Joining a group would mean rules and obligations. Luda took the rejection well and said he respected my attitude. Then he brought up something that really caught my attention: magic pets. He told me that in the old days, the most powerful hunters could use a special soul communication magic to bond with magical beasts and turn them into companions. Only high-level hunters could learn this skill, and beginners could only bond with beasts much weaker than themselves. But as they grew stronger and more skilled, they could tame increasingly powerful creatures. Rangers and Grand Rangers, the highest hunter ranks, could even tame beasts 2 full levels above their own power. Since other professions struggled to fight enemies at their own level, a hunter walking around with a beast 2 levels stronger was absolutely terrifying. That's why hunters used to be considered the most powerful profession on the entire continent. I was fascinated. Back on Earth, I was a sniper, and being classified as a hunter in this world felt like a natural fit. So learning that hunters had once been the strongest profession was exciting, until Luda told me the bad news. The soul communication magic was incredibly difficult to master. Without exceptional natural talent, it was impossible to learn. Many hunters tried with only basic skills and got eaten alive by the beasts they approached. Over the centuries, fewer and fewer hunters could use it. Eventually, only one person on the entire continent still knew the technique: a Grand Ranger named Autolock, whose magic pet was a level 8 Golden Tiger King. Together, they had defeated the fire elemental lord that controlled the Blackstone Abyss, which is why dwarves were able to settle there. But that was over 100 years ago. One day, Autolock announced he was retiring into the wilderness and disappeared completely. Nobody ever saw him again, and the soul communication magic was lost with him. I sighed at that. Just my luck. I come to this world as a hunter, and the hunter's greatest ability is extinct. But then I thought about it and shrugged it off. Nobody said I had to stay a hunter forever. I'd always thought of myself more as a warrior type anyway. And being a rogue didn't sound too bad either. Mage though? No, that probably wasn't for me. Meanwhile, Little Tiger had been going crazy since the food arrived. The moment the beef plates hit the table, he started drumming on my helmet with his paws, drooling as he watched Luda tear into the meat across from us. I shoved a whole plate his way just to shut him up. I was also watching Luda eat with a mix of horror and amusement. He was a minotaur, a bull-headed creature, happily chomping down on beef. At one point, he even said he wanted to trade some female minotaurs to pirates in exchange for a whole ship full of rum. I spit my drink all over the table. Female minotaurs? My mind immediately pictured dairy cows. This guy was absolutely insane. Just as I was recovering from that mental image, a clear female voice rang out from the tavern entrance. I want to hire someone. Every mercenary in the room, myself included, turned to look. A girl appeared at the tavern entrance. Young, maybe 13 or 14 years old, wearing a plain white mage robe and holding a cheap peachwood staff. She had an apprentice mage badge pinned to her chest, and her gear was clearly low-quality stuff from a second-rate magic shop. But what really stood out was her hair, a brilliant fiery red that cascaded over her shoulders like a waterfall of flame. Some of the more experienced mages in the room noticed it right away. Apparently, that kind of natural red hair meant she had an exceptional talent for fire magic. She announced in a trembling voice that she wanted to hire someone. The mercenaries gave her one look: ordinary clothes, no money, helpless expression, and turned back to their drinks. Even the low-ranked mercenaries who were desperate for work ignored her. Nobody saw any profit in helping her. Her eyes filled with tears. One warrior in worn-out armor asked what she was paying. She said she had no money. Her mother was going blind, and a priest had told her that only the gallbladder of a 3-headed magic snake could cure her. She broke down crying before she could finish explaining. The warrior shook his head and looked away. The girl stood in the doorway, sobbing quietly, not knowing whether to stay or leave. I couldn't just sit there and watch. She reminded me of the kind of hardship I'd seen in Ursi's life. A kid with a dead father trying to save her only remaining parent. I asked about her father, and she could barely choke out the words. He'd been killed by a magic beast years ago. She was practically an orphan, not much different from my own situation in this world. I stood up and told her I'd help. She looked up at me with wide, disbelieving eyes, tears still streaming down her face. I said goodbye to Luda, who laughed and called me a soft-hearted meddler, but said he respected it, and told me to come find him whenever I wanted. The girl's name was Lena. She led me to her home, where another young woman was waiting anxiously at the gate. About 20 years old, black hair and a ponytail, wearing a better quality gray-white robe with a blue gemstone set into her staff. Her name was Xiaowei, and she was clearly more experienced than Lena. She looked me over with obvious doubt. No rank badge, strange clothes, a wildcat on my shoulder. I didn't exactly inspire confidence. She asked bluntly whether I could actually handle a 3-headed magic snake, a level 3 beast. That made me pause. I'd volunteered without thinking about the details. I had no real idea how strong a level 3 beast was. But I'd killed that blue wolf on the way here, and it had a crystal core inside, which meant it was at least level 3. So I pulled out the glowing blue crystal to prove I wasn't all talk. In the dim evening light, the crystal shone with a beautiful deep blue glow, far more impressive than when I'd first dug it out of the wolf. Xiaowei's eyes went wide and her jaw nearly hit the ground. She examined it carefully and told me it was actually a level 5 wind wolf crystal core, not level 3. She said she'd only ever seen one like it on her teacher's staff. Wind attribute crystals could increase a mage's casting speed, making them extremely rare and valuable treasures. She added that a level 5 wind wolf was so fast and cunning that even a grand mage might not be able to defeat one alone. The fact that I'd killed it meant my strength was equivalent to a great hunter at minimum. I was stunned myself. That wolf I'd fought by the lake was level 5? No wonder it had nearly killed me. And apparently you needed to be a great hunter to take one down. The hunter profession really had fallen on hard times if that was the benchmark. Then I made the mistake of asking how much the crystal was worth, since I was completely broke and needed to sell it for food money. Xiaowei looked at me like I'd just slapped her. She said nothing like this existed on the open market. I'd be the first person ever to sell one, and it would fetch an enormous amount of gold. She was clearly furious at the idea of such a treasure ending up in some random magic shop. But I had zero money and needed to eat. So what else was I supposed to do with it? Lena's mood completely flipped. She was suddenly beaming with excitement. If I could kill a level 5 beast, then surely a level 3 snake would be no problem, and her mother's eyes could be saved. She asked Xiaowei to take her to check on her mother, who had apparently just fallen asleep after a difficult spell. Xiaowei's whole demeanor softened around Lena, becoming gentle and caring like a big sister. I followed them inside. I wanted to see for myself how bad the mother's condition really was. I followed Xiaowei and Lena into their dark house. The only light came from a faint, flickering glow in a small bedroom. When I stepped inside, the first thing I noticed wasn't the pale woman sleeping on the bed. It was the knight's long sword hanging above her headboard. It was about 3 feet long, beautifully crafted with strange rune-like symbols carved into the scabbard that seemed to spiral and coil as if they were alive. The handle was wrapped tightly in layers of thin rope, a trick experienced swordsmen use to keep their grip firm when the blade gets slick with blood. Whoever owned this sword had been a seasoned fighter. The woman on the bed looked frail and exhausted, her face white as paper with dried tear tracks running down both cheeks. Lena crept to the bedside and gently touched her mother's face, tears silently rolling down her own cheeks. Her small shoulders shook as she tried not to make a sound. Xiaowei stood behind her, stroking her hair, eyes turning red too. Looking at this scene in the dim lamplight, something stirred deep inside me. I couldn't fix everything wrong in this world, but I could fix this. I made up my mind right then. I would get that snake gallbladder no matter what. After we left the room, Lena told me the full story of her family. Her father had been a high-level warrior, a squad captain in a mercenary group of several hundred fighters. He was talented at coordinating team tactics, and his squads always completed their missions with minimal losses, which earned him great respect within the corps. The family wasn't rich, but they lived happily. Lena had shown remarkable natural talent for fire magic from a very young age. She was always pestering Xiaowei, whose real name was Awir, a trainee priestess 6 years older than Lena and a student at the Magic Academy, to teach her spells. Awir finally got the restless little girl to calm down by teaching her basic meditation, and to everyone's surprise, Lena took to it immediately. Her father used to smile and say she was born to be a mage. Torsy City's Magic Academy was the best on the continent, teaching both magic and combat arts. Getting in was every young person's dream, but the entrance requirements were strict and the tuition was enormous. Being a mage was an expensive profession. Without rare magical materials and tools to aid your training, you'd hit walls no matter how talented you were. That's why noble-born mages far outnumbered common-born ones. To give Lena the best possible future, the family lived frugally, and her father took on every dangerous mission he could find, risking his life again and again to save up gold coins for his daughter's education. It paid off. Lena made it into the academy, specializing in fire magic. But happiness never lasts forever. Her father's squad encountered a newly advanced level 7 Wind Wolf King leading a massive wolf pack. The Wolf King was trying to establish dominance and attacked the squad with savage fury. Lena's father ordered his teammates to retreat and stayed behind alone to cover them. But a level 7 beast was far beyond what a high-level warrior could handle. When the mercenary captain arrived with reinforcements, the battlefield was nothing but blood, torn limbs, and carnage. All they found was the father's longsword. The captain brought it back with red eyes and left the family some money before walking away. That was the end of everything for this household. Lena's mother hung the sword above her bed and cried every single day from that point on. She cried until her tears ran dry, and eventually her beautiful eyes went blind from the endless weeping. I listened to all of this with a heavy heart. I forced myself not to dwell on it too much, or I'd lose my composure. Little Lena was sobbing again, and Awir held her close, telling her gently that they'd all meet at the house early tomorrow morning and go kill the 3-headed magic snake together. Once they had the gallbladder, her mother's eyes would heal. Lena wiped her nose and said bravely that once her mother could see again, she'd show her the fireball spell she'd just learned. Looking at this little girl, I felt a warmth I hadn't expected. I was alone in this world with no family at all. Torsy was like a brother to me, and now I decided Lena would be like a little sister. A person can't survive without emotional connections, family, friendship, love. You need at least one. I promised Lena I'd come back in the morning and I would absolutely bring that snake gallbladder home for her mother. She smiled through her tears and made me swear I'd really come. After leaving their house, I walked through the busy nighttime streets toward the shops I'd been told about. I needed money badly. I went to a leather goods store first and sold the blue wolf's pelt. When the shopkeeper placed 2 shining gold coins in my hand, I almost couldn't believe it. 2 gold coins. Back in Sunset Village, a single gold coin was enough for a hunter's family to live on for an entire year. The currency system here used copper, silver, and gold. 100 copper made 1 silver, 100 silver made 1 gold. 2 gold coins meant I could live comfortably for a very long time. I decided not to sell the crystal core after all. The wolf pelt alone gave me more than enough to get by, and after seeing how Xiaowei had looked at that crystal, practically drooling, I understood it was genuinely precious for mages. It could increase casting speed, she'd said, and Lena was a mage. The thought formed quietly in my mind. Maybe this crystal should go to her someday. I asked the shopkeeper for directions to a cheap inn and headed that way, feeling pretty good about life for once. But after turning a couple of corners, I noticed someone following me. At first I figured it was just a coincidence, someone going the same direction. But after several more turns, the footsteps were still there. In my line of work, coincidence stops being coincidence after the 3rd turn. I ducked into a dark alley, pressed myself flat against the wall, and waited. The footsteps grew closer. The moment a shadow appeared at the entrance, I lunged forward, grabbed the person's arm, twisted it behind their back, swept their legs, and pinned them face down on the ground in a perfect restraint hold before they even knew what happened. The stalker let out a startled yelp. I leaned in close and asked, "Who are you?" The person pinned under me was shouting that his name was Lundo and that I should remember him. In the pitch-black alley, I couldn't see his face, and I barely knew anyone in this city. But then he said the magic words. He was the thief from the city gate, the one-eyed saved from Luda's sword. That didn't calm me down at all. It made me angrier. I tightened my grip and told him exactly what I thought of him. I'd stuck my neck out to help him, and he'd repaid me by running away and leaving me to fight a minotaur. Some gratitude. I could feel him squirming underneath me, testing my hold, searching for weak points. I had to admit, he had decent instincts for a thief. He found the soft spots in my restraint technique faster than most people would. But decent wasn't good enough. I adjusted my grip every time he tried something, and he couldn't break free. Finally, he gave up and surrendered, wailing dramatically about the pain, even though I knew I wasn't using much force. This kid would have made a great actor. I pulled him to his feet and demanded to know why he'd been following me. My first thought was that he wanted to steal my money. I'd only just gotten those 2 gold coins and hadn't even warmed them up yet. He swore he wasn't trying to rob me, that he just wanted to thank me. I told him thanks were noted and started walking away. He called after me, stammering, unable to get his words out. So I stopped and asked him point blank, why did he try to rob Luda in the first place? He explained that he'd just arrived in Torsy city from the countryside. He'd spent all his money on the journey and hadn't eaten anything all day. When he saw Luda playing with a gold coin at the tavern, hunger overrode his judgment and he grabbed it and ran. Halfway through the chase, he got so scared he threw the coin back, but Luda kept coming after him anyway. That's when he decided to run out of the city gates, hoping to outrun the Minotaur in open ground. The rest I already knew. I asked why he didn't just join a mercenary group if he had skills. He said nobody would take him without a professional rank badge, same problem I had. I asked who taught him thief skills, and his voice got quiet. An old man named Thomas had raised him since he was a baby. Lundo was an orphan who never knew his parents, and Thomas had taught him everything. Thief techniques, survival skills, all of it. Thomas had been a mid-level rogue in his younger days. But last month, Thomas died, and Lundo had nowhere left to go, so he set out on his own. Another orphan. This world seemed to be full of them. His situation was actually a lot like mine. Newly arrived, no connections, no rank badge, no money, nowhere to sleep. Except I'd at least managed to sell a wolf pelt that afternoon, which put me slightly ahead of him. I asked him directly whether he'd followed me because he saw the gold coins in my hand outside the leather shop. He admitted it. He was starving, had no place to go, was too scared to rob anyone else after what happened with Luda, and I was the only decent person he'd met since arriving. He just wanted help. Looking at him, I guessed he was maybe 16 or 17 years old. I couldn't just leave a kid to starve on the streets or let him turn into a real criminal. So I told him fine. I'd buy us both dinner and a place to sleep for the night. His face lit up like a lantern. He promised to repay me someday. I told him not to bother and to just follow me before my own stomach ate itself. I found the inn district near the mercenary guild, picked a clean-looking place, and ordered a huge spread of food. Lundo and I tore into it like animals. Little Tiger, of course, ate more than both of us combined, so there was zero risk of anything going to waste. After we were stuffed, the waiter showed us to our rooms, then asked if we'd like to use the inn's bathhouse, a massive pool that could fit 100 people, only 10 copper coins per person. After days of running through mountains and fighting wolves and minotaurs, a hot bath sounded incredible. I looked at Lundo, laughed, and said absolutely. The bathhouse was genius. The merchants who ran these inns knew exactly what exhausted mercenaries wanted after a long day. Food, drink, then a good soak. I lay in the warm water listening to groups of mercenaries swapping stories. The conversations were even better than at the tavern, since here nobody's mouth was busy chewing meat. Experienced fighters could read your profession just by looking at your body. Bulky muscles meant warrior, pale and thin meant mage or priest, lean and flexible meant thief or hunter. While we soaked, Lundo told me more about his background. He was from a small village in the southern part of Gaunchin Nation. Old Thomas had not only taught him rogue skills, but had also developed a strange obsession later in life, something called engineering. He'd lock himself in his workshop for days building bizarre gadgets and contraptions. The villagers had nicknamed him Thomas the Technician. Engineering. Technician. Those 2 words lit up something in my brain. A grin spread across my face. If this world had people tinkering with mechanical engineering, there might be a lot more possibilities here than I'd imagined. Things were about to get very interesting. Just like the waiter promised, that bath knocked me out cold until dawn. Most of the inn was still asleep when I crept downstairs, ate breakfast, and went back to check on Lundo. The kid was still out like a log, probably hadn't slept properly in days. I left 10 silver coins on the table for him so he wouldn't starve, closed the door quietly, and headed to Lena's house. Lena and Awir were already waiting outside when I arrived. Even Lena's mother had gotten up and was sitting by the front door. The woman looked better than last night, though her half-open eyes were still cloudy and lifeless. She stood up slowly and bowed to me, thanking me politely for helping her daughter. I told her not to worry. Lena was so sweet, I wanted to adopt her as my little sister. I promised I'd bring back that snake gallbladder no matter what. Lena was practically bouncing with excitement and grabbed both me and Awir by the hands, dragging us toward the city gates while her mother called out behind us to be careful. On the way, Awir told me the plan. Her teacher had mentioned a place called Lime Wetlands, about 2 kilometers west of the city in the desert plains, then a stretch northward. Magic snakes were common there, though most were low-level, and level 3 ones were actually rare. That was somewhat reassuring, but I still worried about running into something nastier than expected with 2 girls depending on me. Awir, whose full name I finally learned was Awir, a mid-level priestess, seemed to have a chip on her shoulder about me. She kept needling me about not having a rank badge, calling me a coward when I mentioned caution, and rolling her eyes when I asked basic questions. I asked her to call me Brother Wang Feng, like Lena did, which she responded to with a cold snort. Still, underneath the attitude I could tell she was a good person. She'd clearly been taking care of Lena and her mother out of pure love for a long time. I took advantage of the walk to squeeze every bit of knowledge I could out of her. She explained the entire classification system to me, calling me stupid the whole time. Magic beasts are ranked from level 1 to 9, with dragons sitting above the scale entirely. The only known level 9 beast was the 9-headed serpent demon, second only to dragons in power. Nobody had actually seen a dragon in living memory, which was a bit disappointing. I'd been dying to know if they were real. Combat professions were divided into 5 types: warrior, mage, priest, hunter, and thief. Each had 7 ranks. 4 hunters it went: apprentice, junior, mid-level, senior, great hunter, ranger, and grand ranger. The beast levels corresponded roughly to professional ranks. A level 1 beast matched an apprentice, level 3 matched mid-level, level 5 matched senior, and level 6 and 7 matched the top 2 ranks. Level 8 and 9. Beasts were so terrifying that no single person of any profession could take them alone, though apparently a handful of legendary individuals on the continent had broken through to an 8th rank that went beyond the normal system. I asked her all of this because I genuinely didn't know, but every question earned me another, "You're so stupid," from Awir. When I mentioned I'd been planning to sell the Wind Wolf crystal, she looked physically pained and muttered, "Absolutely hopeless," under her breath. I still didn't fully understand why that bothered her so much, but I'd already decided to save it. The desert plains weren't actually a desert, more like a vast grassland with patches of wild grass taller than a person. It looked wide open and peaceful, but Awir warned me it was extremely dangerous. Wild beasts and magic creatures hid in the tall grass, and bandits who robbed trade caravans operated throughout the area. The road between Torsy City and the cities of Gongqin Nation passed right through here, which is why merchants always traveled in large groups with mercenary escorts. Almost nobody crossed alone. The guards at the city gate gave us pitying looks as we walked out: an apprentice mage, a mid-level priest, and a hunter with no rank badge. I could practically hear them thinking, "Those 3 are going to die." We reached the Lime Wetlands after a while. It looked similar to the rest of the plains, just greener and wetter, with patches of standing water scattered around. Awir told us to stay alert. I took point with my bone bow ready, scanning the ground carefully. Small snakes were everywhere, slithering through the grass constantly, but nothing large or magical. I was searching the undergrowth with every ounce of focus I had when Little Tiger suddenly scratched my shoulder and pointed his paw toward a larger pool of water ahead. I looked where he was pointing. The water was shallow and clear enough to see the bottom, and sitting in it were 3 greenish, moss-covered stones of almost identical shape. I studied those stones carefully. Nothing seemed obviously wrong with them, but I trusted Little Tiger's instincts completely. His senses were far sharper than mine, and he'd never pointed at something without reason. There was definitely something off about that pool. I signaled for the girls to stay back and began creeping forward slowly on my own. I crept closer to the pool and crouched down at the edge. Those 3 moss-covered stones looked odd. They seemed connected underneath the mud, with another green section poking up a short distance away. I had my bayonet ready and was about to reach into the water to investigate when all 3 stones opened their eyes at exactly the same moment. 6 bright green snake eyes stared straight at me. The 3 heads shot up out of the water like lightning. This was the 3-headed magic snake we'd been looking for, and it was nothing like what I'd imagined. I'd been picturing something maybe a bit bigger than a normal snake, python-sized at worst. This thing was bigger than a crocodile. The 3 heads immediately spat jets of venom straight at my face. Pure instinct kicked in. The moment the heads broke the surface, I slammed my hand down on the middle head and vaulted my entire body upward into a handstand on top of it, barely dodging the venom streams. While inverted, I drove my bayonet through the left head's left eye and out through its right eye, yanked the blade free, then stabbed it deep into the middle head, and used my body weight to drag the blade downward, splitting the skull nearly in half. 2 heads destroyed in less than a heartbeat. The snake finally realized what was happening and screamed, whipping its massive tail around and slamming me off its back. I flew through the air as the remaining head spat another stream of venom after me. I hit the ground rolling, dodged the venom, grabbed my bow, knocked an arrow, and fired in one fluid motion. The arrow shot through the air and plunged straight into the snake's still open mouth. The last head jerked backward from the impact, then flopped forward and crashed into the water. Dead. The whole fight, from the moment the heads rose to the snake's body splashing lifelessly into the bloody pool, lasted maybe 2 seconds. No dramatic battle, no desperate struggle. The snake barely got a single real attack off. I almost felt bad for it. As I turned to walk back to the girls, a soft white glow suddenly appeared over my body. The ache in my back where the tail had hit me faded away completely. I looked up and saw a weir with her staff raised, face pale and swaying on her feet. She'd cast a healing spell on me. I rushed over and caught her in my arms just as she was about to collapse. "The snake! Go kill the snake!" she gasped. I glanced back at the bloody pool. It's already dead. Lena was jumping up and down nearby, squealing that she hadn't even been able to see what happened before the snake was finished. A weir turned her head, stared at the motionless snake corpse for a long time, then slowly looked back at me with enormous eyes. "You killed it?" We stood there staring at each other for about 5 awkward seconds before she suddenly said, "Let go of me." I realized my hands were still on her waist and pulled them back quickly, stammering something about how she'd looked like she was about to faint. Her face turned bright red. She admitted I was impressive, killing a level 3 beast in the blink of an eye, then quickly changed the subject, saying we should get the gallbladder and hurry back to treat Lena's mother. I jogged over to the snake and cut it open with my bayonet. Inside I found 2 treasures, a smooth, black, egg-shaped gallbladder, and a glowing green crystal core. I brought both back to show the girls. Aweir's eyes lit up when she saw the crystal. She explained it was the snake's magic core, and since this snake used poison-based attacks, the crystal likely had detoxifying properties, very useful for a priestess like her. Then her expression darkened, and she asked suspiciously if I was planning to sell this one too. I told her the money from selling the wolf pelt was plenty for now, and I had no use for a poison crystal anyway. I offered it to her on the spot. She stared at me, clearly wanting it desperately, but too polite to just grab it. So I added that she'd better take it before I got broke again and sold it to some random shop. That did it. She snatched it out of my hand immediately, giving me one of her trademark dirty looks as she did. Before we left, I ran back to the snake. If a wolf pelt was worth 2 gold coins, a snake skin this massive had to be worth something too. I stripped the hide off in about a minute, rolled it up, and rejoined the girls. Time to get that gallbladder home to Lena's mother. On the way back, Aweir and I walked in awkward silence, but Lena more than made up for it. She was bouncing with excitement. She complained that I'd killed the snake too fast, and she didn't even get a chance to use her fire magic on it. Then, to prove she really could do it, she stopped in the middle of the road, planted her feet, raised her little staff, and started chanting. What happened next blew my mind. The air around her right hand began to shimmer red, swirling inward like a vortex, gathering faster and faster. Her fiery red hair started whipping around on its own as if caught in a wind that didn't exist. A ball of red-hot energy the size of a fist formed in her palm. She let out a sharp shout and flung it forward. The fireball streaked across the field and slammed into a clump of dead grass with a bang, blasting it into ash instantly. I stood there staring with my jaw hanging open. This was real magic, not from a beast, but from a little girl's hands. If a 13-year-old apprentice could do this, what could a high-level mage do? The thought was terrifying and thrilling at the same time. Lena beamed with pride, her cheeks flushed. Awir wiped the sweat off the girl's forehead with a silk handkerchief and teased her about showing off. I asked if all fire mages could do that, and Awir explained it was a basic fireball spell. Lena could use it at such a young age only because of her extraordinary natural talent with fire elements. Then she noticed my expression and asked suspiciously if I wanted to learn magic too. She told me hunters couldn't. Battle chi and magic apparently conflicted with each other. That raised more questions. I asked about battle chi, what it was exactly, how hunters used it. Awir was losing patience with my ignorance. She explained that high-level hunters also develop battle chi, which makes their arrows and weapons far more powerful. Then she grabbed Lena and walked ahead, clearly done answering my stupid questions for the day. I trailed behind, thinking hard. If I was going to be a hunter in this world, I need to learn battle chi eventually. But where? And from whom? I also asked Awir about the healing spell she'd cast on me earlier, the white light that had washed over my body and made the pain from the snake's tail disappear. She said it was a mid-level healing spell, the strongest she currently knew, and it had drained all her magic energy at once, which is why she'd nearly collapsed afterward. I thanked her, sincerely, though privately I thought that if I'd been in real danger, the spell would have come too late, either because of her experience level or because healing magic was just inherently slow. Something to keep in mind. We made it back to the city before dark. Lena burst through the front gate and threw herself into her mother's arms, shouting that they'd gotten the gallbladder and her eyes would be fixed soon. Sifei, Lena's mother, smiled and stroked her daughter's face, asking if the kind priestess and hunter had returned safely too. I introduced myself properly and told her Lena's fireball was genuinely impressive. Sifei bowed to me again in thanks, and I had to physically stop her from going all the way to her knees. There was no way I was going to miss seeing this treatment. The next morning, I wolfed down breakfast at the inn and hurried to Lena's house. Awir and her teacher had already arrived. The teacher was a middle-aged man, slightly plump, wearing silver-white robes and a tall priest's hat. He carried an ancient-looking dark red staff with a large blue gemstone set into the handle, identical to my wind wolf crystal. His whole presence radiated a solemn, dignified authority. This was clearly a man of considerable power. He pulled out the snake gallbladder, said calmly, "Let us begin," and Sifei nodded. What followed was the most incredible thing I'd witnessed in either world. He drew a circle in the air with his bare hand and released the gallbladder. It hung motionless in front of Sifei's face, suspended by nothing. He began chanting in a language I couldn't understand while his free hand started glowing with white light, tracing patterns through the air that left trails like shooting stars. When the chanting ended, he raised his staff and its gemstone erupted with brilliant light that engulfed Sifei completely. He thrust his glowing hand toward the gallbladder and all the white energy surged into it, wrapping it in blinding radiance. The light spun rapidly around the gallbladder for several seconds, then split into two beams that shot directly into Sifei's eyes and were absorbed completely. The gallbladder vanished. One final chant, one more flash from the staff, and everything went quiet. The room looked exactly as it had before, as if nothing had happened at all. The priest examined Sifei's eyes closely and told her to open them. Awir and Lena were already pressed against Sifei's sides, staring at her face with desperate hope. Lena held her breath, too afraid to speak, silently begging for her mother to see her. Sifei opened her eyes. They were clear and bright, with faint traces of white light still fading from her pupils. She looked at Lena's face, and her composure shattered completely. "Lena, I can see. I can see you." She grabbed her daughter and sobbed, holding her tight. "My Lena, I can finally see you again." Awir was crying too, standing beside them with tears streaming down her face. After a while, Sifei remembered the priest was still there. She wiped her eyes and tried to kneel before him in gratitude, but he caught her gently and said it was his sacred duty. Healing those under God's care was what clergy were meant to do. I stood in the corner watching all of this, my nose stinging, fighting back tears of my own. I'd been a complete atheist my whole life, both lives. But standing in that room, watching a blind woman see her daughter's face for the first time in years through what could only be called a miracle, even I couldn't help thinking, maybe there really is something divine watching over these people. After the priest and Aweir left, I was about to head out too when Sife stopped me. She thanked me again for helping get the snake gallbladder and asked where I was staying. I told her I'd been at an inn but was planning to find a cheap place to buy or rent nearby. She immediately offered me a spare room in her courtyard. She said the house was close to both the Mercenary Guild and the Magic Academy, which her husband had specifically chosen so Lena could get to school easily. The extra room was dusty and messy, but nothing a good cleaning couldn't fix. She also pointed out that since I was new in town and didn't know anyone, living nearby would let us look out for each other. I thought it over, and it made perfect sense. I'd already decided I wanted to help this family, and Lena was growing on me more every day. I accepted gratefully and told Sife to let me know anytime she needed help with anything. Sife sent Lena to help me clean up the room while she went to prepare food. Lena grabbed my hand and pulled me excitedly toward the room, chattering about how now they'd have someone to protect them from bad people. When I pushed the door open, though, I froze in the doorway. The room was spacious with basic furniture, a bed, table, chair, and bookshelf, but what caught my eye immediately were several swords hanging on the wall. One sword in particular grabbed me and wouldn't let go. It was entirely crimson red, with a blade that widened from handle to tip before cutting off sharply into a trapezoid shape. The handle had two curved handguards and was wrapped tightly in layers of thin rope, just like the long sword hanging over Sife's bed. The whole weapon looked aggressive, beautifully crafted, and deadly. I couldn't take my eyes off it. Lena told me all the swords belonged to her father. He'd been a high-level warrior who used this room to practice. She pointed at a section of stone floor worn smooth from years of footwork drills and a pile of bricks in the corner that he used to chop through during training. She said it wasn't very interesting to watch, just chopping and breaking bricks, so she'd stopped coming to see him practice. But for me, this room was perfect. Big, quiet, with training space and weapons on the walls. I'd been worrying about where to practice, and here it was handed to me for free. Lena and I scrubbed the place down until we were both dripping with sweat. Then Sife called us in for a meal she'd prepared. Afterward, Lena insisted on showing her mother the fireball spell. Sife and I sat in the courtyard watching as the little girl repeated her performance from the wetlands. The swirling red energy, the hair flying around, the fireball blasting into nothing, and then showed off several other small spells she knew. We clapped and cheered for her like a proud audience. While Lena performed, I took the chance to ask Sife all the questions I'd been too embarrassed to keep asking Aweir. Unlike Aweir, Sife never called me stupid. She answered everything patiently and in detail. She told me the priest who healed her eyes was a professor in the priesthood department at Torsy Magic Academy. She also told me about Aweir's background, another orphan, raised by an old priest at a church who taught her kindness and faith. Aweir had followed in his footsteps and become a priestess herself. This world really was full of orphans finding their way. As we watched Lena showing off, I half-jokingly told Sife that Lena was so adorable I wanted to officially adopt her as my little sister. Sife laughed and said she'd love nothing more. It would mean someone to help keep the troublemaker in line. She turned to Lena and asked if she'd be willing to accept me as her big brother. Lena didn't hesitate for even a second. She didn't say yes, or okay, or think about it. She just looked straight at me and called out, "Brother!" I nearly jumped out of my chair. "Sister!" I shouted back, grinning so wide my face hurt. Just like that, I had a family in this world. A cute little fire mage sister who could blow things up and wasn't afraid of anything. No more being completely alone. I was so happy I could have done a backflip right there in the courtyard. Wang Feng was no longer a man without anyone to care about. I was settling into life in Torsy City nicely. I bought some proper hunter leather armor to replace my camouflage uniform for daily wear, and I started spending my evenings at the mercenary tavern. I'd order a jug of rum, sit back, and listen to mercenaries bragging about their adventures and sharing news. Sometimes I'd raise a glass to congratulate someone who'd struck it rich, and other times when a team was short a member for a mission, I'd volunteer just for the fun of it. Gradually, I got to know a lot of people and felt myself becoming part of this world. I also developed a daily routine. Intense training in my new room at Lena's house in the mornings, a bath, clean clothes, then off to the tavern during peak hours when the place was most alive. But tonight when I walked in, something was wrong. The tavern was practically empty. Normally at this hour you couldn't find a seat for love or money, but tonight only a handful of people were scattered around. The only familiar face was Big Beard, my nickname for a dwarf warrior named Uffuch. He was a sight to behold. Ancient bronze-colored skin, battered metal armor, a massive battle axe with chips in the blade strapped to his back, and a beard so long and tangled it looked like a bundle of dead grass. Every time he ate, that beard either soaked up his beer like a sponge or dragged through his food plates. The man was absolutely shameless. Big Beard was the ultimate freeloader. The moment he spotted anyone, he'd plant himself at their table and start demolishing their food and drinks. If there wasn't enough, he'd happily order more. On your tab, of course. You could beat him senseless and still wouldn't shake 2 coins loose from him. Everyone else in the tavern had learned to run the moment they saw him coming. I, unfortunately, had been the sucker who fell for his routine. When I first met him, he'd spun tales of his centuries of experience so convincingly that I'd been genuinely impressed and treated him to feast after feast. It took me an embarrassingly long time and a noticeably thinner wallet to realize he'd been recycling the same handful of stories the entire time. The other mercenaries had been quietly laughing at me for weeks. The moment he saw me walk in tonight, his whole face lit up like a dog spotting a bone. He dragged me to a chair he'd saved for me and immediately started bellowing at the waiter for a bucket of beer, 2 plates of beef, 3 roasted chickens for servings. I cut him off before my wallet could suffer any more damage, telling him I'd already eaten dinner. Once I got him focused, he explained what was going on. A level 6 earth scorpion, a giant magical scorpion, had appeared on the main trade road through the desert plains. It had attacked a fully loaded merchant caravan and was now squatting on the road, blocking all traffic. The major merchant guilds in the city had jointly posted a bounty, 2,000 gold coins for whoever killed it. So every mercenary in the city had rushed out to try their luck. I asked why he called it going to die. Surely that many fighters could handle one level 6 beast. Big Beard shook his head with the weary confidence of someone who'd lived over 300 years. Dwarves live incredibly long lives, and despite his pathetic appearance, this old con artist had centuries of genuine experience buried under all the freeloading. That's what had originally hooked me. Beneath the shamelessness, he actually knew things. He waited until the waiter finally brought his food before he'd continue talking. Between bites of roasted chicken, bones crunching between his teeth, grease running down his impossible beard, he explained. First, the merchants always lied about difficulty levels on bounty postings to save money on payouts. If they said level 6, it was almost certainly level 7. Second, a level 7 beast was a king among monsters. It would never travel alone. It would have an entire swarm of regular scorpions following it like an army. Third, earth scorpions had insanely strong natural armor, could cast earth magic at a level rivaling a grand mage, and their venom was instantly lethal. Even a drop would kill you. Against all of that, a mob of average mercenaries was just a buffet. The moment he finished explaining, I was on my feet. A level 7 magical beast, a massive battle, 2,000 gold coins. There was absolutely no way I was missing this. I threw some coins on the table, shouted a quick goodbye to Big Beard, and sprinted for the door before he could react. Behind me, I heard him yelling with a chicken foot hanging out of his mouth, but I was already gone. I tore through the streets toward the desert plains at full speed. Near the city gates, I spotted a few thieves running back toward the city with panicked expressions on their faces. I thought about stopping to ask them how things were going out there, but they were running so fast we passed each other in a blur. Didn't matter. I'd see the situation for myself soon enough. I sprinted through the darkness toward the desert plains. When I reached the mercenary lines, the scene was ugly. Wounded fighters were scattered everywhere on the ground, groaning and crying out. Some had legs that looked like they'd been splashed with acid. The flesh rotted away, oozing horrible green liquid. Priests were rushing between the injured, casting healing spells until they collapsed from exhaustion themselves. Everyone who could still sit was either a demoralized mercenary or a priest trying to recover their magic energy. I grabbed a female priest running past and asked what was happening. She confirmed what Big Beard had predicted. The scorpion was at least level 7, not 6 like the merchants claimed. Dozens of fighters were hurt, some were dead. She thought the scorpion had taken heavy damage too, but the front lines had pulled back. She broke free from my grip and ran to help another wounded man. The retreating mercenaries were furious. A squad captain was cursing the merchants for lying about the beast's level, saying he'd lost several men. Someone suggested they all charge back in together to finish it off, but the captain shut that down. One spray of venom had taken out too many people already. The consensus was to send word back to their guild leaders and return at dawn with proper leadership and fresh troops. Nearly everyone agreed. I shook my head quietly. If the scorpion was really as weakened as they said, waiting until morning would let it recover. By then, killing it would cost even more lives. But the mercenaries were broken, their fighting spirit was gone, and pushing them back in now would be pointless. So I decided to go see for myself. I activated every bit of speed I had and blasted past the retreating groups so fast that one thief yelped and swore he'd seen a shadow fly by. Even Luda, who happened to be among the group, looked around confused and saw nothing. They dismissed it as nerves and kept walking. As I pushed deeper, I started seeing scorpion corpses, regular ones, each the size of a wash basin, scattered everywhere in pools of stinking green fluid. My scalp tingled at the sight. These were supposed to be the small ones. I crawled over a low hill and finally saw it. The earth scorpion was like a small mountain, a massive golden-brown creature, bigger than a tank, covered in burns and wounds from the mercenaries' combined assault. Several large gashes oozed green liquid. The beast was clearly in terrible shape, barely able to hold its body up, breathing in heavy, labored gasps. But it was trying to heal. Its body glowed with a faint yellow light, and it was spitting a brighter green liquid onto its own wounds, which the skin absorbed immediately, slowly restoring the charred areas back to their original color. Then I noticed something even more alarming. The ground beneath it was moving. The hard-packed earth was crawling up the scorpion's body like a living thing, slowly covering it in a shell of dirt. I recognized this from tavern stories. Earth shield magic. The scorpion was wrapping itself in an armor of compacted earth that would harden like steel, making it virtually invulnerable while it recovered. I was about to retreat and report back when the climbing earth suddenly stopped. The scorpion's enormous head dropped heavily to the ground, its mouth gaping open, gasping for air. The healing spell had drained its last reserves of energy. It was completely spent. A bold idea flashed through my mind. I unslung my bone bow, knocked an arrow, and began pulling. The familiar warm energy rose from deep in my core, flooding through every muscle, compressing and layering force into the bow, like squeezing toothpaste from bottom to top. The bow bent slowly into its full moon shape. The scorpion's head suddenly jerked up. It had sensed the energy building near it. Its remaining good, I swept the darkness, searching. The instant that massive head turned toward me, I released. The arrow cut through the night, trailing a faint white streak, like a shooting star, and buried itself completely into the scorpion's eye, so deep that only a tuft of feather poked out from the ruined socket. The scream that followed shook the earth. Every mercenary back at the rest area leaped to their feet and ran for the city in blind panic. The scorpion's tail slammed the ground with catastrophic force. The earth beneath where I'd been standing erupted in massive stone spikes. I was already rolling sideways, 7, 8 consecutive tumbles, barely staying ahead of the explosions of rock chasing me. I steadied myself, drew the bow, fired. Rolled again. Fired. Rolled and fired. Over and over, arrow after arrow, each one finding the scorpion's head. I kept shooting until I'd put more than 10 arrows into it, and my body was so drained I couldn't even pull the bowstring anymore. I stopped, gasping for air, and looked at the scorpion. Its head was a pincushion of arrows, every one planted in a vital spot. The yellow glow around its body had vanished. Its tail lay flat on the ground, motionless. It looked dead, but this was a level 7 beast. I wasn't taking chances. I sat down cross-legged right there on the ground and waited, keeping my eyes locked on the massive body while my strength slowly returned. When I felt recovered enough, I pulled out my bayonet and approached carefully. The stench of green fluid was overwhelming. I walked up to the scorpion's head and examined my work. Arrows everywhere, all perfectly placed. The first arrow had gone so deep into the eye socket that only the feathered tip was still visible. I finally let out a long breath of relief and started to say, "This scorpion is definitely dead." The word, dead, hadn't left my mouth when the scorpion's other eye snapped open. The instant that I opened, my body reacted before my brain could even process what was happening. I drove my bayonet into the scorpion's head like a piston. Stab, 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 dozens of times in seconds, turning the massive skull into a honeycomb of puncture wounds. I was screaming at the top of my lungs, "Die? Just die already." Then I jumped as high as I could, gripped the bayonet with both hands, and plunged it straight down into the scorpion's brain, dragging the blade sideways with everything I had left. The head split open with a wet crack and a gush of green fluid. I stumbled backward and collapsed on the ground, completely drained. During that frantic attack, the scorpion's toxic green blood had splattered all over me. My clothes were dissolving into holes wherever it touched. My face burned like fire. My right hand was the worst. The flesh was torn and rotting, bleeding a sickening mix of black and green. I knew I had to get out of there fast, or the venom would kill me. I dragged myself up and headed back toward the city as quickly as my ruined body could manage. The next morning, the mercenary tavern was in an uproar. Every single conversation was about the same thing. Someone had killed the Earth Scorpion overnight. The mercenary leaders who'd marched out at dawn with fresh troops found nothing but a headless monster covered in arrows. The debate raged. Some hunters were ecstatic, claiming it proved their profession wasn't washed up after all. Others insisted it had to be the legendary Grand Ranger Autolock, since no living hunter could possibly solo a level 7 beast. People argued back and forth with growing intensity. Meanwhile, I'd wrapped my destroyed right hand in black cloth, covered my face with a mask, and put on all black clothing. I walked straight through the tavern into the Mercenary Guild's service counter. "I'm here to turn in a mission," I told the pretty receptionist. "Which mission?" "The Earth Scorpion." The entire room went dead silent. Every pair of eyes snapped toward me. The girl stared at me in disbelief. She'd been listening to the debates all morning and clearly expected the killer to be some ancient legendary figure, not a young man. She asked for proof. I pulled the scorpion's crystal core from inside my coat and held it up. A golden gemstone, glowing brilliantly even in daylight. The tavern exploded. Someone who recognized it screamed that it was absolutely the real Earth Scorpion crystal core. People surged forward to get a closer look, but kept their distance. They could see the rotting flesh on my bandaged hand and knew it was scorpion venom. Nobody wanted to accidentally touch that. The noise was deafening. Some confused mercenaries were still asking if this was supposed to be autolock, until their neighbors punched them unconscious out of sheer frustration. The receptionist was mesmerized by the crystal and forgot what she was doing until I reminded her I needed this mission closed. She said a bounty this large required the manager's approval and ran to fetch him. Another girl started my registration paperwork. "Name?" "Sniper," I said. She smiled knowingly. Anonymous submissions happened all the time. She recorded my profession as hunter, noted I had no rank badge, and took my local address. An expensively dressed elderly man emerged from the back, the guild manager. He examined the crystal core carefully, and his stern face broke into excitement. He asked me to follow him to a private room. I was annoyed by the hassle, but figured a quiet room beat being mobbed in the main hall. He led me through a maze of corridors to a hidden room where another old man was already waiting, white-robed, white-haired, with the distinguished look of a sage. The manager sealed the door, and a blue shimmer appeared around the walls. He explained it was a soundproofing barrier, so nobody could eavesdrop. The white-robed elder complimented me, saying even he probably couldn't kill a level 7 beast and walk away alive. I kept my composure. Years of sniper training meant my eyes gave away nothing, even when I was surprised. Then the manager got to the real point. They wanted to hire me privately for a special mission, assassinate Duke Malak of the Gaunchin Nation. The payment was 1 million gold coins. That number hit me like a truck, though I kept my face blank behind the mask. Before I could respond, the manager raised his hand and continued. He said they wouldn't provide any written mission documentation. I'd understand mercenary rules well enough to know why. He wouldn't explain their reasons for wanting the Duke dead either, saying I'd understand in time. They were giving me 3 years to complete it. If I killed Malak within 3 years, I could collect the 1,000,000 gold coins anytime. If I chose not to do it, there would be no consequences. I could sense this was tied to some deep power struggle between factions, and getting involved would mean endless trouble. I didn't fully understand the situation, and I wasn't going to pretend I did. One thing was clear, though. They had the wrong person. I wasn't an assassin for hire. I stood up from my chair. I believe I can collect my 2,000 gold coins now. After I left the private room, I learned from a conversation I wasn't supposed to hear that the two old men were more impressed than they let on. The white-robed elder, apparently named Sanfuni, told the manager named Chizumu that he couldn't detect even a trace of battle chi or magical energy from me. That seemed to shock both of them deeply. The elder thought I was someone extraordinary, and even though the manager was skeptical, they both agreed to keep an eye on me. The white-robed elder then vanished from the room in an instant, literally disappeared into thin air. These were clearly very powerful people. Once I was out of the mercenary guild, I ran at full speed to an empty stretch of land outside the city where nobody could see me. Then I finally let it out. 2,100 gold coins. I'd actually managed to squeeze an extra 100 out of the manager on top of the bounty. Here's how that happened. I'd been expecting them to hand me a chest full of gold coins that I'd have to haul home on my back. Instead, the manager gave me a small crystal card, basically a magic-powered bank card. He said it had 2,000 gold coins stored on it and could be used at any mercenary guild branch across the entire continent. Fully networked, completely secure. The card itself cost nearly 100 gold coins just to make, which is why I'd never seen or heard of one before. It was strictly a rich person's tool. Coming from Earth, I understood the concept immediately. As I pocketed the card, I made an offhand comment, half joking, half wistful, about how anticlimactic it was to get a tiny card instead of a pile of shining gold coins, and how it would be nice to have 100 physical coins to carry home just for the satisfaction. I didn't actually expect anything to come of it. But the manager laughed, had someone fetch a bag of 100 gold coins, and tossed it in front of me as a bonus. I didn't waste a single second being polite. I thanked him, grabbed the bag, and bolted out the door. After confirming nobody had followed me, I stripped off the black disguise, stuffed it away, and walked home like a normal person with a clear conscience and a very full wallet. The night before, after killing the scorpion, the first thing I'd done was scrub myself with water for over 30 minutes straight, trying to wash off all the venom. Most of the poison came off and the wounds stopped spreading, but when I woke up the next morning, my injuries hadn't healed at all. Normally, the white tiger energy in my body fixed everything overnight, but scorpion venom was apparently beyond what it could handle. I needed a priest's healing magic. So before heading to the guild to collect the bounty, I'd sent Lena to fetch a weir. By the time I got home from the guild, the weir was already at the house. She'd been admiring the beautiful new staff I'd bought Lena as a gift, high quality, beautifully carved, made of dark redwood. Weir had immediately assumed I'd paid for it by selling the Wind Wolf crystal core, which made her simultaneously annoyed and slightly impressed that I'd at least thought of my little sister. What she didn't know was that I still had the crystal core. I hadn't sold it. The new staff and everything else came from the scorpion bounty money. When Weir walked toward my room calling me a big idiot and demanding to know why I'd summoned her, I opened the door with my most charming smile and welcomed her with the most elaborate, flowery greeting I could manage, praising her presence as bringing light to my humble dwelling and so on. She wasn't having any of it. She pursed her lips and told me to cut the nonsense and get to the point, because she was a busy woman with important things to do. I kept smiling and invited her inside. What I really needed was for her to heal my scorpion venom wounds, but I hadn't figured out how to explain where I'd gotten them without revealing that I was the mysterious masked man who'd killed the earth scorpion. That was a secret I intended to keep. The moment Weir walked into my room, she spotted my right hand and gasped. The skin was rotted green and raw, impossible to hide. I played it down, saying a scorpion had bitten me. She immediately connected it to the news flying around the city about the earth scorpion attack. She asked if I'd gone out there with those mercenaries, and I casually admitted I'd tagged along for the excitement. She took my hand to examine it more closely, and her expression softened into something that looked almost like genuine worry. She started saying, "If something had happened to you," but caught herself mid-sentence and stopped. When I grinned and asked her to finish that thought, her face turned bright red and she dropped my hand, snapping back to her usual sharp tone. She scolded me for being weak and reckless, then told me the big news I already knew. The earth scorpion had been killed by a mysterious hunter, and the whole city was buzzing about it. She compared me unfavorably to this unknown hero, calling me a lazy drinker who only knew how to run his mouth. I muttered something about being glad I'd taken precautions to hide my identity, but she didn't catch it. When she asked what I'd said, I covered with a joke about needing her healing so I could leave the house. She told me to stand still and started her treatment. I pulled off my shirt to give her better access to all the venom wounds across my body. She spun around with her face burning crimson, yelling at me. I stammered that I'd thought removing my shirt would help, and quickly put it back on. Embarrassing. The healing itself was incredible. I watched with my own eyes as the rotted, green flesh on my hand and body regenerated at insane speed, new pink skin growing over the wounds in real time until every trace of damage was gone, without even a scar. Priestess magic was genuinely miraculous. When she finished, Iwir was pale and sweating from the effort. I helped her sit on the bed and wiped the sweat from her forehead. She smiled weakly and reminded me I owed her a big favor, asking how I planned to repay her. A gift, I said, and pulled something from under my pillow, holding my closed fist out to her. She was suspicious and said she didn't care about guessing games, that I couldn't possibly have anything worthwhile. I opened my hand. The earth scorpion's golden crystal core sat in my palm, radiating magnificent light. Iwir's face went through about 6 emotions in 2 seconds. Her eyes went wide as eggs. Her mouth fell open, and she froze completely. I told her the truth. I was the hunter who killed the earth scorpion. That's why I was covered in venom wounds. The crystal was real, level 7, and I was giving it to her. She couldn't believe it. She asked me twice if I really killed it, and twice if I was really giving it to her. Each time I confirmed, she seemed to short-circuit a little more. I took her hand and pressed the crystal into it. She started to say something about how expensive it was and how much it could sell for, then suddenly stopped mid-sentence and clutched it to her chest protectively, as if afraid I'd change my mind. I laughed and promised I wasn't going to take it back or sell it. We sat there in an awkward, blushing silence for what felt like forever. Neither of us knew what to say. I finally broke the tension by asking if she had plans. She whispered that she didn't, completely forgetting she'd claimed to be busy earlier, and then asked in a voice so quiet I could barely hear it if I'd go shopping with her. I said yes, and we headed into the city together. The streets were packed and loud, and everywhere people were talking about the mysterious black-masked man who'd killed the earth scorpion and collected the bounty. The rumors had already spiraled out of control. One merchant described the masked hero to my face as a massive, broad-shouldered, muscle-bound brute with a terrifying appearance. Iwir had to physically restrain herself from laughing until we were out of earshot, then burst out asking how I, a lean, normal-looking guy, had been transformed into a hulking monster in people's imaginations. I played along, pretending to cry out to heaven about the injustice of it all. While we walked, she told me about an upcoming Magic Academy tournament, held every 3 years, where students competed by profession and rank. The biggest prize wasn't just advancement in rank, but the chance to become the personal student of Academy Dean Sanfuni, who was a Grand Magus. He personally selected one standout apprentice mage each tournament to mentor. Lena had an excellent shot at winning since she could already cast every beginner-level spell despite being an apprentice. But her main rival was a girl named Shamanda, a princess from Gonchin Nation who specialized in water magic, which directly countered Lena's fire. Worse, the princess was spoiled, mean, and had access to all kinds of expensive magical equipment her royal family could provide. Iwir was also competing in the priestess division. She admitted she'd originally had low odds, but with the crystal core I'd just given her, the outcome might be very different. She thanked me, and for the first time, she called me Wang Feng instead of idiot. I was thrilled. That crystal core was worth every copper just for that. We were chatting happily when an overly excited male voice called out from ahead. Iwir? What a coincidence running into you here. Iwir and I were enjoying our walk when a group of people appeared in front of us. One of them, a pale, well-dressed guy in the same silver-gray academy robes as Iwir, called out to her with way too much excitement. His name was Solala, and he stared at Iwir so intensely I don't think he even noticed I existed. He could barely string a sentence together around her, stammering about buying materials for a teacher. Clearly the guy was head over heels. Standing next to him was a thief-type student named Roliedo, who was eyeing me with obvious suspicion. Aweir introduced me as her friend, a hunter named Wang Feng, and introduced the group as fellow academy students. Roliedo's face instantly split into an oily grin, and he came toward me with his hand extended, acting like my new best friend. But I caught it immediately. As he walked up, he slid his foot out at an angle to trip me. The oldest trick in the book. I almost laughed. Instead, I channeled energy into my leg and kicked his shin with enough force to crack a brick, all while keeping a big friendly smile on my face and shaking his hand warmly. He let out a strangled grunt. His face went red, his whole body twitched, and he jumped sideways trying to hide the pain. When Aweir asked what was wrong with his leg, he claimed it was just an itch and crouched down to secretly rub what was probably a massive purple bruise. I kept smiling. This guy had some actual skill. The way he'd recovered was quick, but if he wanted to play dirty tricks, he'd picked the wrong target. After we said goodbye and walked away, Aweir burst out laughing once we turned the corner. She'd figured out exactly what happened and told me Roliedo was always harassing her at the academy with his gang. I told her I should have kicked harder. She warned me they'd come after me with numbers, but she was grinning the whole time, not worried at all. I told her seriously that anyone who bothered her would be the one regretting it. She went quiet for a moment, looking at me with an expression I couldn't quite read, then softly said, "Come on, help me buy some things." With my pockets full of gold from the scorpion bounty, I went on a spending spree. Whatever Aweir looked at, I bought without asking the price or haggling. She took full advantage, loading up on all kinds of daily necessities and supplies, an absurd amount of stuff. When I jokingly complained, she reminded me I'd offered to pay for everything. I puffed up my chest and told her to keep going. I could take it. She grinned wickedly and pointed at about 10 more things for the shopkeeper to wrap up. By the time we were done, I was carrying so much I looked like a walking department store, bags hanging from my hands, shoulders, even my neck. She told me she was going to visit her grandfather Rashidjir at the church and wanted to go alone because she had private things to discuss with him. I offered to at least help carry everything inside, but she insisted she could handle it. Then, right in front of me, she transferred every single item from my body onto hers in about 30 seconds and stood there perfectly balanced under the mountain of bags. I was genuinely impressed. I waved goodbye and turned to leave. That's when it happened. Something warm and soft pressed against my cheek for just a fraction of a second. I spun around and saw Aweir's face glowing red as she jumped away from me. "Idiot," she shouted, then turned and ran toward the church like a rabbit, loaded down with all those bags and still somehow graceful. I stood there frozen, touching my cheek. Her lips had been there. The faint scent of her lingered on my skin. My blood started boiling. My fists clenched so tight the knuckles cracked. In my entire life, both lives, no girl had ever kissed me. I looked around wildly. Nobody was watching. I spotted a big stone brick nearby, charged over, and punched it into dust with a single blow. Yes, I roared at the sky. Thank God there was nobody around the church area, because I must have looked absolutely insane. I practically floated home, so happy I gave gold coins to some beggars on the street who nearly knocked themselves unconscious bowing in gratitude. When I walked through the gate, Lena ran up and told me someone was waiting for me, a hunter sitting outside my room. A hunter looking for me? I knew plenty of people from the tavern by now, but I'd never told any of them where I lived. I asked Lena where this person was. "He's sitting right by your door, waiting for you." The hunter waiting at my door turned out to be Jemini, the young guy I'd seen around the mercenary tavern. He greeted me excitedly and asked to come inside. Once the door was shut, I asked him bluntly how he'd found my address. Instead of answering, he smiled and said, "You're the sniper, aren't you?" That caught me off guard. Sniper was the fake name I'd given at the guild counter when collecting the scorpion bounty. I didn't deny it and asked how he'd figured it out. His reasoning was sharp. He'd been at the city gate months ago when I'd shot an arrow to stop Luda from chopping off the thief's hand. Being a fellow hunter, he'd noticed something nobody else had. My arrows had feathers tied to the tail. He'd never seen that before, so the image stuck in his memory. When he went out to the scorpion's corpse that morning with the other mercenaries, every single arrow embedded in the beast's head had the same distinctive feathered design. He'd put two and two together immediately. Then he'd track me down through Lena, since he'd seen her take me away from the tavern that day to help with her mother. I cursed myself internally for the oversight. In a world where nobody used fletching on their arrows, my signature improvement was basically a neon sign pointing right at me. Thankfully, Gemini seemed to be the only one who'd noticed. I confirmed everything. Yes, I killed the Earth Scorpion. Yes, I was the masked man at the guild. Gemini could barely contain himself. He said killing a level 7 beast solo put me at Grand Ranger level, which was the highest hunter rank on the continent. I felt a bit guilty about that. I'd really just gotten lucky by catching the Scorpion when it was already beaten half to death by hundreds of mercenaries. But I wasn't about to correct the record. He said 2 men named Barton and Myers wanted to meet me, the warrior and mage duo I'd seen at the tavern who seemed to have endless topics to discuss between them. They had something important to talk to me about. I was too comfortable on my bed to care, still floating on the memory of Iwir's kiss, so I waved Gemini off and told him maybe later. I dozed off and was having the most wonderful dream of my life when 2 voices outside jolted me awake. Of course, Barton and Myers had come to find me themselves since I wouldn't go to them. I was genuinely annoyed. 20-something years alive across 2 worlds, and the one time I get a dream worth having, these 2 show up and ruin it. I told them to skip the pleasantries and get to the point. Barton laughed and said they'd been skeptical when Gemini first guessed I was the Scorpion killer, but now that it was confirmed, they had a serious proposal. Myers took over. He asked if I'd heard of the fallen ruins inside Mist Valley. I knew about Mist Valley. Mercenaries called it Death Valley because it was permanently shrouded in dense fog and crawling with phantom wolves that could turn invisible. Going there without exceptional strength was suicide. Myers explained the backstory. Over 100 years ago, a necromancer had built a dark temple deep inside Mist Valley, where he practiced terrifying shadow magic. To keep intruders away, he'd cast a ghost curse over the entire surrounding area, turning ordinary wolves into phantom wolves and filling the region with permanent fog. Eventually, the necromancer died suddenly for unknown reasons. Rumors spread that he'd left behind enormous treasure. Many mercenary teams had searched for the temple ruins over the decades, but nobody could find the exact location. Myers had a friend who not only knew precisely where the ruins were, but had actually been inside. The friend confirmed there really were valuable relics left behind by the necromancer. However, to retrieve the treasures, they specifically needed a powerful hunter on the team. With the hunter profession in decline, finding someone strong enough had been nearly impossible until now. I wasn't particularly interested in treasure that might not even exist. But adventure? In a magic world full of mysteries? That was something I couldn't pass up. I'd been hanging around taverns long enough. It was time for some real action. Plus, Barton and Myers had solid reputations as honest, straightforward people. I asked who this mysterious friend was. Myers smiled and invited me to the mercenary tavern the next morning, where he, Barton, and the friend would be waiting to discuss everything in detail. The next morning I walked into the mercenary tavern and found Barton and Myers sitting with a mysterious figure in a black robe, his face hidden deep inside a dark hood. His skin was deathly pale. He looked like someone pulled out of a grave. A wave of cold, dark energy radiated from him so strongly that Barton and Myers, 2 normally calm and composed men, were sitting rigid with tension, barely holding themselves together. But strangely, I didn't feel affected by it at all. The mysterious man noticed this immediately and seemed pleased. He raised his glass and proposed a toast to our future cooperation. As I glanced at his cup, I froze. The golden beer inside had turned into a pitch-black liquid, swirling with dark mist. He drank it like it was the finest wine. I quickly checked my own glass. Still normal golden beer, thank God. I swallowed hard and drank it down. He introduced himself as Bacon, a grand necromancer. That sent a jolt through me. From my months in the tavern, I'd learned that this world's magic was divided into 6 elements: wind, water, fire, earth, space, and light. But there was a 7th type that existed in the shadows: dark magic. Necromancers practiced the most feared and hated branch of it, summoning the dead, controlling corpses, casting curses, even trading their own souls for power. The continent despised them. The Mage Guild refused to acknowledge them as real mages, and the Church of Light considered them heretics to be exterminated on sight. 500 years ago, a necromancer had risen to become a dark demon king whose power devastated entire regions, leaving nothing but death and barren wasteland. It took the combined might of the Pope of the Church of Light and the Holy Paladin of Holy Light Castle, two absolute pinnacle light magic masters, to finally kill him. After that, necromancers lost most of their advanced techniques and faded into obscurity. The survivors kept quiet, stayed hidden, and mostly stopped causing trouble, so people gradually stopped hunting them. They were still feared and avoided, but no longer killed on sight. And now Barton and Myers had brought me one. A grand necromancer at that. An incredibly rare creature in this world. I asked Bacon about the fallen ruins. He explained that the ruins weren't on the surface, but underground, surrounded by layers of powerful magic formations. Only a necromancer's dark eye ability could locate the entrance. Anyone else who stumbled upon it would be destroyed by the defensive arrays. He'd found the entrance himself and could break through the outer protections, but the real challenge was inside. The necromancer who'd built the temple had filled it with ghost servants, additional magic barriers and formations far more powerful than the outer ones, and most critically, a demon guardian summoned from another dimension to protect the main laboratory. This demon was extremely fast, could fight both in close combat and with magic, and, the worst part, was completely immune to all magic. Mages were helpless against it. Warriors and thieves couldn't match its speed, so they'd just get slowly blasted to death from a distance. Even enchanted arrows like armor-piercing magic arrows were useless because of the magic immunity. The only thing that could kill it was a hunter with raw physical strength, arrows powered by pure force rather than magic. That's why they needed me specifically. Bacon said that besides our group of 4, he also needed a priest for the expedition. As for the treasure inside, he listed what the dead necromancer had left behind: a handwritten necromancer's journal, a skull staff that any mage would kill for, a robe of darkness with legendary magic defense properties, and numerous other valuable items. Bacon said he only wanted the journal. Everything else could be ours. I looked at Barton and Myers. They were trying to stay composed, but I could see the excitement underneath. A skull staff and a robe of darkness were apparently treasures of almost mythical value. When do we leave? I asked. Bacon laughed, clearly delighted. He said he needed a day to prepare and would wait for us tomorrow morning in a small forest north of the city. He reminded us to bring a priest. After Bacon left, the oppressive dark aura vanishing with him, I asked Barton and Myers how they'd gotten mixed up with a necromancer. Myers explained that Bacon was actually his childhood friend. They'd grown up together before Bacon became fascinated with dark magic and chose that path. Despite being a necromancer, Myers vouched for his character completely. He added quietly that if Bacon hadn't fallen in love with dark magic, he'd probably be a high-ranking official in the Gauntine Nation by now. I had my team. Now I just needed a priest. And I knew exactly who to ask. Early the next morning, I headed to the meeting point with Weir and Little Tiger. Getting Weir to come hadn't been easy. The moment I mentioned there was a necromancer on the team, her priestess instincts kicked in and she flat out refused. Light magic practitioners and dark magic users were natural enemies, and she wanted nothing to do with it. But I talked her around with a combination of persuasion and the promise of magical treasures left behind by a legendary sorcerer. Even the most principled mage can't resist that kind of temptation. Little Tiger had been living his best life lately, eating Sifei's cooking, playing with Lena all day, getting attention from Weir when she visited. The pampered cat had gotten noticeably fatter and had zero interest in following me to smoky taverns full of minotaurs. I had to physically peel him off Weir's shoulder on the way there, which earned me an indignant howl. But having him on my shoulder made me feel strangely calm and grounded, like always. I decided from now on, this cat was staying with me whether he liked it or not. We reached the small forest north of the city where Bacon, Barton, and Myers were already waiting. Bacon was wrapped head to toe in his black robes as usual, looking like death warmed over. He was ready to depart immediately. He appreciated punctuality. But then he noticed Weir and his enthusiasm evaporated. A mid-level priestess? Are you joking? He said sharply. He explained that the ruins were filled with a plague curse that would poison anyone who entered. The ghost servants and demon guardian also dealt toxic damage. Ideally, they needed a bishop-level priest to fully dispel the plague, but but at minimum, they needed someone who could cast detoxification barriers and cleanse poison effectively. A mid-level priestess, he said, simply didn't have enough holy power for the job. Everyone looked at me with doubt. Myers opened his mouth to say something, but held back. He'd probably guessed Weir and I were close, but the priest choice was critical to the mission's success. That's when Weir pulled out the Earth Scorpion crystal core. Beacon's jaw dropped. A level 7 crystal with immense purification power would more than compensate for Weir's current rank. He immediately connected the dots. If I had a scorpion crystal to give away, I must be the mysterious hunter, sniper, everyone was talking about. He laughed loudly and admitted he'd underestimated me. Barton stared at the crystal, then at me, struggling to form words. I'd given a level 7 crystal core to this girl? I cut the conversation short. I gave it to her. Let's go. The truth was, I hadn't brought Weir carelessly. I knew exactly what the mission required. Finding a willing high-level priest who'd cooperate with a necromancer was nearly impossible. Their rigid faith wouldn't allow it. Weir only agreed because of me. And after confirming she could handle the detox role with the crystal's help, I'd also seen this as a good opportunity to give her real combat experience. We marched hard all day, stopping only for brief rests, and reached the outer edge of Mist Valley by evening. Bacon called a halt and said we'd camp here for the night and enter the valley at first light. Once inside, things would get dangerous fast. Everyone needed to restore their energy. The group collapsed onto the ground, exhausted from the long trek. Everyone except me. Years of military training meant this kind of march was nothing special. And Little Tiger, who'd been riding my shoulder the entire time, wasn't tired either. He was, however, absolutely starving, and made sure everyone knew it by howling and dramatically swallowing his own saliva to make his stomach gurgle audibly. I told Barton to keep watch and disappeared into the woods with Little Tiger to hunt. I came back with a whole young wild boar, built a fire, and roasted it with every trick I'd learned from years of wilderness survival. Despite having almost no seasoning, the meat came out crispy, tender, and fragrant. Barton was so impressed he said he'd eaten the bones too. I divided the meat into equal portions beforehand, giving Little Tiger an extra-large share because I knew the glutton would finish first and come after mine. Sure enough, the cat demolished his portion in record time and started howling for more. But this time I was ready. I'd eaten my own share at maximum speed. I sat there grinning smugly as he cried and found nothing left to steal from anyone. Then my grin froze. Weir was still eating, leaning gracefully against a tree, taking small ladle-like bites of her portion. And Little Tiger had spotted her. The treacherous cat was creeping toward her with a scheming look on his face that I knew all too well. The moment we stepped into Mist Valley, visibility dropped to about 3 meters. Everything was swallowed by thick, white fog. I suggested Bacon take command since he knew this place best, and he agreed immediately. He assigned positions. Me at the front, Barton guarding the rear, Myers and Weir protected in the middle. Bacon began chanting, and black mist poured from his body, expanding outward until it wrapped around all of us in a dark bubble. To my amazement, instead of blocking my vision, the black mist made everything crystal clear. I could see the winding path ahead, the rocks, even the phantom wolves lurking in the distance. Bacon called it True Mist, a dark magic spell that let anyone inside it see through illusions, fog, and even invisibility effects. The other mages stared in wonder. I was secretly jealous. Dark magic had some seriously useful tricks. With the fog neutralized, we moved quickly through the valley. A few phantom wolves tried sneaking up on us, but Barton and I cut them down easily since we could see them coming from far away. After half a day of marching, Bacon stopped us in front of an enormous ancient tree. The entrance to the ruins is beneath this tree, he said, his pale face expressionless under the black hood. When the magic formation appears on the ground, you'll see a circle in the center. Get inside it as fast as you can. If you're too slow, you die. He said it the way someone might mention the weather. He started a long, complex incantation. A massive green eyeball materialized in front of him, dripping green fluid, and floated up toward the tree. Beacon's body lifted off the ground on a platform of black mist. The eyeball began spinning, casting green light downward, and a huge magic formation flickered into view on the earth, glowing symbols and lines arranged in intricate patterns. At the center was a circle about 2 meters wide, and it was shrinking. The instant I saw it, I grabbed a weir and dove for the center. Barton and Myers were right behind us. Bacon glided in on his black mist cloud. The circle kept contracting, forcing us to squeeze tighter and tighter together. Then something horrifying happened. A phantom wolf had wandered onto the formation, and a withered black claw shot up from the ground, seized the wolf's hind leg, and yanked it underground in one violent motion. Nothing remained but a puddle of blood. Awir's grip on my arm became painfully tight. Bacon finished his spell with a shout. Everything went black. I felt my body spinning through a narrow space at tremendous speed, like being sucked through a dark tunnel. When I opened my eyes, we were standing on a large circular platform in total darkness. The green eyeball still hovered above Bacon's head, providing eerie light. An identical magic formation was beneath our feet. Everyone instinctively pressed closer together, still shaken by the memory of that black claw. Bacon told us to relax. This inner formation wasn't dangerous. We'd made it inside the ruins. This platform was the safest spot down here. He sat down to recover his magic energy, which the transportation spells had drained heavily. The place was like an underground labyrinth. We were in a large hall with several open doorways leading into darkness. From every direction came terrible sounds, screeching, moaning, wailing, echoing through the halls. Nobody dared move until Bacon was ready. When he stood up, he briefed us on what to expect. The dark eye would reveal magic formations covering the floors. Green ones were harmless detection arrays that had mostly stopped working since the necromancer's death. Blue ones were attack formations. Step on one, and we'd all be killed instantly. We had to navigate carefully between them. He handed Awir 3 diamond-shaped purple crystals he'd made, magic power batteries. If her energy ran low, she could crush one to instantly restore her magic. He only had 3, so they were precious. He told Myers to manage his own magic reserves carefully. Then he reminded everyone, don't waste magic too early, follow his commands exactly, and Awir was not to cast anything without his explicit order. Awir was pale and terrified, clinging to my arm. She nodded silently. The dark eye floated ahead of us as we followed Bacon through one of the doorways. The floor lit up beneath it, dense clusters of red and green magic formations everywhere, flickering like deadly landmines. We picked our way through the gaps between them, step by careful step. Beyond the door was a long dark corridor. The only sounds were our footsteps and occasional bursts of chittering, shrieking ghost noises. Bacon explained these were ghost servants, summoned creatures the necromancer had left behind. They were numerous but nearly blind, so as long as we kept our distance, they wouldn't detect us. He warned us that if the ghost servants had evolved into ghost mothers, a stronger variant that could summon additional ghosts on its own, things would be much harder. We emerged from the corridor at the top of a staircase leading down into a larger room. When we looked over the edge, every one of us froze. My spine went ice cold. The room below was filled wall to wall with glowing green eyes. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands, packed so densely they covered nearly every inch of floor space, all staring into the darkness, chittering and moaning. I'd seen a lot of terrifying things in my life, but this was something else entirely. Bacon stayed calm and gave everyone orders quickly. He positioned the dark eye so its green light covered the entire staircase area, making all the magic formations visible. The plan was simple. We'd stand at the top of the stairs and bombard the ghost servants with area of effect magic without stepping off the safe ground. Barton would hold the front line and keep anything from rushing up. I'd watch for ghost mothers, the evolved, larger variants that could summon more ghosts, and snipe them with my bow. Awir would use the scorpion crystal to cast a poison resistance barrier on everyone. Myers would prepare his most powerful ice magic. Everyone began chanting simultaneously. The atmosphere shifted dramatically. Awir finished first. A thin white glow settled over each of us like a protective shell. Then Myers' spell began affecting the air around us, dropping the temperature so sharply I could see frost forming. Snow-white energy churned between his palms. Bacon was the most unsettling. His entire body seemed to dissolve into the darkness, becoming nothing more than a shadow beneath his hood. The air grew heavier and blacker, as if something enormous was being drawn into existence. The ghost servants below sensed it. Their green eyes started darting around frantically in panic. Bacon screamed a command word, and the entire room below erupted into a sea of fire. The spell was called Nethfire, a massive dark magic area attack that turned everything into an inferno of ghostly flames. The screaming was horrific. Burning bodies flew apart, melted limbs scattered everywhere. A half-dissolved skull came flying up at me, and I punched it into fragments. But Bacon warned us that the fire wouldn't last long and told me to find any surviving ghost mothers immediately. He collapsed to the ground, completely drained from the spell. Sure enough, the flames died out after a short time, revealing a devastated room covered in thick molten sludge. About 80% of the ghosts were destroyed. The survivors were mostly ghost mothers, twice the size of regular ghosts, and they were already chanting spells to summon reinforcements. I drew my bow and was about to fire when I noticed something incredible happening above. The ceiling was raining down a blizzard. Myers had unleashed his ice magic. The freezing snow hit the still-burning ghost mothers with a sizzling hiss and froze them solid mid-motion. They toppled into the molten floor, caught between fire and ice, probably not even knowing which one killed them. The blizzard continued for several agonizing minutes, turning every remaining ghost into frozen chunks that then melted in the lava below. Myers collapsed beside Bacon, equally drained. Between the two of them, they'd annihilated an entire army of ghost servants without any of us taking a scratch. Bacon laughed and said the ice and fire combination was something no living creature could survive. He crushed one of his purple magic crystals to start recovering energy, then announced he had a brilliant idea. What he did next was disturbing even by this world's standards. He began chanting over the mountain of corpses on the room floor. The dead bodies started moving on their own, stacking, climbing, merging together. In minutes, they'd assembled into a massive humanoid creature over 2 meters tall, made entirely of fused ghost parts, dripping hot red fluid as it walked. Bacon injected it with a blast of dark energy that turned its entire surface black. He was delighted to discover that because the corpses had been tempered by both ice and fire, the resulting creature had natural resistance to both elements. He called it a corpse golem and said it would be a powerful asset for the next fight. We climbed down into the room and took formation. Barton and I stood in front, Aweir in the back, Myers and Bacon in the middle. Aweir refreshed our poison barriers. Bacon explained that beyond the stone door at the far end was the necromancer's laboratory and the demon guardian. He ordered the corpse golem to go first and break down the door. The creature lumbered forward, its speed boosted by the dark energy wrapping its body. It reached the massive stone door and threw a single punch. The door exploded into rubble. We all held our breath, impressed by its raw power. Then something slammed into the golem from inside the room. The 2-meter-tall monstrosity flew backward like a kicked ball and crashed into the wall behind us with a sickening crunch. Whatever was inside that laboratory had just swatted our strongest weapon aside like it was nothing. Everyone's excitement died instantly. Whatever was behind that door was on a completely different level. The stone door exploded and out walked the demon guardian. Black armor, black cape, twisted horns, a hideous face, and a massive crescent moon blade in its hands. The thing was terrifying, but Bacon was already barking orders. Priestess, cast light power on Wang Feng. Wang Feng, aim for its eyes. A flash of white light hit me, and I felt my strength surge. I drew my bow and fired without hesitation. The demon had charged straight for the corpse golem and was raising its blade to finish it off, but at the last instant it sensed my arrow and whipped its weapon around, deflecting the shot with a metallic clang. It turned to look at us. In that brief moment of distraction, I fired several more arrows in rapid succession. The demon spun its crescent blade with incredible speed and knocked every single one aside. It screamed in fury and raised its palm. Green fire swirled into a ball of shadow flame, ready to blast us. Then the corpse golem punched it from behind. The demon flew backward, and the unfinished spell detonated in its own hand, blowing its arm to pieces. Bacon laughed and explained this was called magic backlash. When a spell is interrupted mid-cast, the gathered magical energy turns on the caster. The demon had just been destroyed by its own attack. I hadn't wasted those seconds watching. While the demon was deflecting my earlier arrows, I'd been pulling my bone bow to its absolute limit. channeling every drop of energy into one perfect shot. The moment the golem's punch sent the demon staggering, I released. The bow erupted with white light, and the arrow screamed through the air like a comet, burying itself deep in the demon's skull. Before anyone could even react, I pulled my bayonet and launched myself forward. Barton was right beside me, his longsword blazing with blue battle chi, charging with a warrior's combat rush. The golem lumbered in with its massive fists. All three of us hit the demon at the same instant. My bayonet, Barton's chi-enhanced sword, and the golem's fists tore the guardian apart in a single explosive moment. Black blood and body parts scattered everywhere. Bacon stared at the pile of demon fragments in disbelief. "That's it." Then he burst out laughing. "Well then, time for the loot." We entered the laboratory. Weir cast a holy light sphere that illuminated the entire room. It looked exactly like you'd imagine a mad sorcerer's workshop. A long table covered in tubes and dried chemical solutions, a dissected monster corpse, and bookshelves thick with dust and cobwebs. Bacon spotted his prize immediately, the necromancer's journal, lying open on the corner of the table. He pounced on it like a cat on a mouse. Myers went straight for the bookshelves, hungry for the ancient texts. Barton found a small skull-shaped shield in the corner with two glowing red gemstones for eyes, and couldn't take his eyes off it. I stood there feeling useless. I couldn't read any of the books, didn't understand the experimental equipment, and had no idea what anything was for. Weir was equally lost, just holding up her light ball and looking around with wide eyes. Then Little Tiger suddenly bolted under the table. I crouched down to see what had caught his attention and found a skeleton in black robes lying on the floor. Its bony hand clutched a black staff with a skull-shaped head and a dark gemstone on top, the legendary skull staff. Weir pointed out some writing on the floor beneath the skeleton. I read it aloud. "Those who trespass in my domain, die." The temperature in the room skyrocketed instantly. Bacon screamed. "Hellfire!" The entire laboratory erupted in flames. A massive fire trap the dead necromancer had left behind, identical to Beacon's own Nethfire spell, but far more powerful. I didn't even have time to think. Little Tiger dove into the skeleton's black robe and used his claws to pull the fabric over my head, wrapping me in it. My entire body felt like it had been plunged into boiling oil. Everything went black. I woke up to crying. Someone was shaking me gently and calling my name. Every inch of my body burned with pain. I managed to open my mouth, and the shaking stopped. "You're awake." Thank God. Weir's tear-streaked face was hovering above me. I wanted to tell her to stop shaking me before I passed out again, but I barely had the strength to speak. I reached up and touched her wet cheek. "What happened to me?" Beacon's voice came from nearby. He explained that the necromancer had rigged a hellfire trap in the laboratory. When I read the inscription, it triggered. Fortunately, after so many years, the spell had decayed to less than 20% of its original power. At full strength, it would have vaporized me 10 times over. Everyone else had managed to protect themselves. Bacon wrapped himself in dark magic. Barton used his battle chi. Myers and Weir both threw up magic shields. But I'd had nothing. No chi, no magic, no shield. I should have died. The only reason I survived was Little Tiger. In that split second before the fire consumed everything, the cat had grabbed the dead necromancer's robe of darkness, one of the most powerful magical defense items in existence, and pulled it over my head. Even weakened, the hellfire had burned me badly enough that I'd need 2 months to recover, even after Weir's healing. They'd carried me out of the ruins and through Mist Valley. We were now in the forest outside, safe. I asked about the loot. Bacon had his journal. Barton got the skull shield. Myers' books had all burned in the hellfire, but afterward they'd found a small box on the shelf containing a moonstone, apparently priceless. The skull staff went to Weir, and since my clothes had been completely incinerated, they'd put the robe of darkness on me, which was fitting since Little Tiger had technically claimed it by saving my life with it. Everyone had come away with something valuable. Not a bad haul for nearly dying. Bacon told me to shut up and rest. Barton would carry me back to the city. I needed to focus on healing. For the next 2 months, I wasn't going anywhere. Being stuck in bed was torture. My legs had zero feeling. The hellfire had healed on the outside thanks to Weir's magic, but the internal nerve damage was completely beyond what healing spells could fix. Weir even asked her teacher at the academy, and he had no solution either. She told me it would take at least 2 weeks before I'd feel the slightest tingle in my legs, and full recovery could take months. Beacon's estimate of several months in bed haunted me. Weir visited every day, chatting with me for hours to keep me sane, casting healing magic each time, even though it only helped the surface wounds. Barton and Myers came by too, looking like they wanted to tell me something, but losing their nerve every time they saw my condition. I didn't push them. The one bright spot was Little Tiger. The greedy, girl-chasing cat had actually stayed loyal this time, sleeping beside me every night instead of running off to cuddle with Lena or Sifei. I owed him my life. In that split second before the hellfire consumed everything, he'd grabbed the robe of darkness and pulled it over my head and hands. Without that, I'd be dead. My hands were saved too, which meant I wasn't completely crippled. I scratched his ears in gratitude, and he swatted at my face in protest. That's when I noticed something on his paw, a ring, hidden under his thick fur. The sneaky little thief had pocketed a souvenir from the necromancer's laboratory. I scolded him for developing bad habits and confiscated it immediately. The ring was silver-white with strange ancient symbols carved on both sides, and bizarrely heavy, like holding a chunk of iron. When Weir walked in, I casually slipped it onto my finger to hide it. Bad idea. That night, when I tried to take it off, it wouldn't budge. No matter how hard I pulled, it was stuck like it had fused to my skin. Frustrated, I started slowly rotating it while examining it up close. White light exploded from the ring, and suddenly I was looking at an enclosed space, about twice the size of my room, completely sealed, and empty except for a single book sitting in one corner. Stunned, I reached out and grabbed the book. Another flash of light, and the space vanished. I was back on my bed. Everything looked normal, but the book was in my hand. It was real. I experimented frantically. I rotated the ring again. The space reappeared, and the book's spot was empty. I threw the book back in, closed the space, checked my hand. Book was gone. I tossed my bone bow in, closed it, reopened it. The bow was inside. This ring was a portable storage dimension, a magical warehouse I could carry on my finger. I nearly woke up the whole house laughing. Little Tiger had accidentally stolen one of the most useful magical items imaginable. I showered the sleeping cat with praise he couldn't hear. After calming down, I stored the bow inside the ring and pulled out the book to read. It was handwritten on some kind of leather, ancient but perfectly preserved. The first page contained a single ominous line. Desire is the root of corruption. Greed is the devil that leads you into hell. The opening chapter described a meditation technique, written so simply that even someone with zero magical knowledge could understand it. The rest of the book contained advanced magical skills far beyond my comprehension. But that first chapter was clearly meant for complete beginners, meant for me. I had nothing better to do, so that night I tried the meditation method. To my amazement, I slipped into an incredible state of awareness. Everything went perfectly still, yet perfectly clear. I could hear a cricket crawling through grass outside my window. I could sense my own blood flowing through my veins. Over the next 3 nights, I practiced every evening. Each session took me deeper. My senses grew sharper and sharper. Eventually, I could actually perceive the white light energy, the power I'd absorbed from the white tiger back in Sunset Village, flowing through my body with my blood. I watched it travel along my meridians, and whenever it encountered nerve tissue damaged by the hellfire, it would pause and gently stimulate healing, feeding energy into the injured areas. On one of those nights, my leg twitched. I snapped out of meditation, grinning from ear to ear. The white tiger energy was actively repairing my internal damage, and the meditation was accelerating the process dramatically. 5 more days of nightly practice, and on the morning of my 10th day in bed, I tried moving my legs. They lifted off the mattress. Both of them. I could have cried from happiness. I got out of bed carefully, took one step, then another. My legs were stiff and weak, and after just 10 minutes of walking around the room, I was drenched in sweat. But I was walking. There was no way I was staying in that bed another second. I got dressed and headed straight for the Mercenary Tavern, my first outing in 10 days. Lena and Sifei were shocked and delighted to see me up. I walked through the city streets, savoring every step. At the tavern, I scanned the room for Big Beard. I'd actually missed the old freeloader's ridiculous stories, but he wasn't there. Instead, I spotted Barton, Myers, and Bacon sitting together in a corner. All three of them looked miserable. Bacon especially looked like someone had killed his entire family. Something was very wrong. I walked into the tavern on shaky legs and dropped into a chair next to Barton, Myers, and Bacon. All three looked miserable. Barton's jaw nearly hit the floor when he saw me. Nobody expected me to be walking after just 10 days when the estimate was months. I asked what was wrong. Turns out they'd gone back to Mist Valley without me. The necromancer's journal Bacon had grabbed from the laboratory wasn't what he was actually looking for. What he'd taken was an alchemy journal, the dead sorcerer's notes on potion making and alchemical experiments. Valuable, but not the prize. What Bacon truly wanted was a legendary meditation technique called true meditation, said to be the key to how that ancient sorcerer had advanced his dark magic further than anyone in history. The technique had been rumored for centuries among necromancers, and Bacon had risked everything to find it. But when they searched the ruins again, it was gone. Bacon figured the sorcerer had destroyed it before dying, since legend said he'd actually been killed by the very meditation he invented. I sat there listening with a knot forming in my stomach. I was almost certain that the book I'd found inside Little Tiger's stolen ring was exactly what Bacon was describing, a meditation manual written for complete beginners, found in a dead necromancer's secret storage space. I'd already been practicing it for days, and the results were extraordinary. For a moment, I considered telling him. He'd organized the whole expedition and earned his prize. But then I thought about the ring. Explaining the book would mean revealing the storage ring, which would create a whole mess of complications. And honestly, the meditation technique didn't seem like anything dark or dangerous. I could understand it perfectly, practice it easily, and it was accelerating my healing dramatically. It felt like it belonged with me. While I was thinking this over, I accidentally slipped into the meditative state right there at the tavern table. My awareness expanded outward with incredible clarity. The noise of the crowded tavern faded to nothing. I could hear two service girls at the reception counter across the hall whispering to each other about very personal topics. Their conversation was as clear as if they were sitting right beside me. I could even see their expressions in my mind with perfect detail, though I was facing the other direction. I snapped out of it quickly, a little flustered by what I'd overheard. The meditation was getting more powerful every day. I decided to keep quiet about the book. If Bacon ever asked directly, I'd figure it out then. Bacon said his goodbyes to Myers and left the city. Despite the disappointment, the alchemy journal was still an incredibly rare treasure, and he seemed to have made his peace with it. The three of us watched him go. After Bacon was gone, Barton and Myers exchanged a look and turned to me with something they'd clearly been waiting to say for a while. They wanted to form a mercenary group, and they wanted me to join as the leader. Myers explained their backgrounds properly for the first time. Barton came from a famous warrior family. His father had been known across the continent as a war god, but was assassinated due to political scheming. Barton grew up an orphan. Myers was a descendant of fallen nobility whose family had lost everything, including their title. The two of them had been through hardship together and shared the same dream: rebuild their names and rise to greatness. Starting a mercenary group was their path forward. The expedition had helped them both. Myers had managed to save one book from the burning library before the hellfire hit, an ancient water magic tome that would massively boost his abilities. Combined with Barton's new skull shield, they were already stronger than before. They believed they could achieve something great, and having me, a hunter capable of soloing a level 7 beast, would accelerate everything. I was genuinely touched by their stories and their trust in me. These were good men with real ambition and solid character. But I still wasn't ready for that kind of commitment. I'd turned down Luda's offer for the same reason months ago. I valued my freedom too much, and the time still wasn't right. I told them honestly. I appreciated the offer more than they knew, and if I ever decided to join any mercenary group, theirs would be my first and only choice. But for now, I needed to stay independent. Barton took it well. He knew my personality and didn't push. He raised his glass with a warm smile. When you've had enough freedom, come find us. I clinked my cup against his. Deal. I heard Aweir's cheerful voice outside and immediately dove under the covers, pretending I was still bedridden and groaning in pain. She rushed in looking worried and asked if it hurt. I milked it for all it was worth, moaning about how today was especially bad. She pulled back the blanket and started gently checking my legs. That's when little Tiger decided to blow my cover. The traitor had apparently become Weir's loyal defender ever since she'd shared her food with him during the Mist Valley trip. The only person who'd actually given him meat when everyone else had refused. He jumped to the foot of the bed, rubbed against Weir innocently to distract her, then sneaked his paw behind her back and started tickling the bottom of my foot. I glared at him silently, but the cat just grinned and scratched harder. He added his tail for extra effect. Tickling the soles of someone's feet was literally an ancient torture method, and after a few agonizing minutes of trying to keep a straight face, I couldn't take it anymore. I kicked the little monster clean off the bed and yelled at him. The cat landed on the floor howling with triumph. Weir stared at me, standing on two perfectly functional legs, and the realization hit her. She threw her arms around me and burst into tears. "You can move. You can really move. I was so worried about you." Then she scooped up little Tiger and showered him with praise for healing my legs, even kissing the cat on the head while I watched in disbelief. I muttered something about a living, breathing man getting worse treatment than a stray cat. That earned me a quick kiss on the cheek. "Who says?" she whispered, face bright red. We stood there looking at each other. I slowly stepped closer, reached out, and pulled her into my arms. She put her hands up like she was going to push me away, but instead her fingers just gripped my shirt, and after a moment her arms slowly wrapped around my back. Afterward, she made me promise to keep pretending my legs weren't fully healed yet. She didn't want people knowing too quickly and making a fuss. She also told me the academy tournament was starting soon, so she'd need to train seriously with her teacher and wouldn't have much time to visit. I told her to focus on winning and promised I'd be there to cheer her on. She gave me her signature pout and said I'd better show up or else. After she left, I decided to go check on Lundo. I'd barely seen the kid since our night at the inn together. He'd joined the Firebear Mercenary Corps, the group currently managing Torsy City's governance, and had been running around non-stop doing errands for his squad captain. Last time I'd bumped into him at the tavern, he'd barely had time to scribble down his address before rushing off again. Following his directions led me on a ridiculous journey through winding back streets until I finally arrived at the most isolated, run-down little house I'd ever seen. It sat completely alone in the middle of an overgrown wasteland, surrounded by nothing but dead grass stretching to the horizon. When I knocked on the door, dust rained down from the frame, and I jumped back thinking the whole structure might collapse on me. Lundo's angry voice roared from inside, cursing whoever was disturbing his sleep and yelling about neighbors who needed to work in the morning, which was hilarious considering there wasn't another building within a mile. When I announced myself, there was a loud crash of someone falling out of bed, followed by the creaking door slowly opening to reveal his bleary-eyed face. It was well past morning, and the kid was still sleeping. He let me in, and the interior matched the exterior. Nearly empty, dusty everywhere, spiderwebs in the corners, rotted window frames with a giant web covering the hole where glass should have been. He'd bought the place for 10 silver coins, which was dirt cheap, and he seemed genuinely proud of the deal. He pointed out the window at the vast empty grassland and called the view beautiful. I had to admit, in a desolate sort of way, he wasn't wrong. I asked about his job with Firebear. He slumped over the windowsill and groaned that he was exhausted, running around for his captain every day until his bones nearly fell apart. The initial excitement of joining a big mercenary group had clearly worn off already. Classic Lundo, all fire for about 3 minutes. But I hadn't come to chat about his career struggles. I had something much more important to discuss with him. Something had been nagging at my mind ever since I first arrived in Torsy City. The explosive that Lundo threw at Luda during their chase. I'd seen it detonate with my own eyes. This world had gunpowder, and I needed to get my hands on it. I went to visit Lundo at his new place. After navigating through what felt like an endless maze of back alleys, I found the most pathetic little house sitting alone in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by dead grass. The kid had bought it for 10 silver coins, which explained a lot. The walls were crumbling, the window frames were rotted through, and spiderwebs served as curtains. Classic Lundo. I got straight to the point and asked about the explosive he'd thrown at Luda. He called it an iron shell bomb. His grandfather Thomas had made them. Only 3 total. He still had 2 left. I asked to see them, and he dug out a bundle wrapped in black cloth from a battered cabinet. Inside were 2 crude cylinder-shaped devices wrapped in tin plating. Lundo warned me to be extremely careful, drop one, and it would explode, probably taking my hand with it. He backed up several paces as I picked one up. I asked if I could have one, and he agreed without hesitation. Then I told him I was going to take it apart. His face went white. He grabbed the door frame and yelled at me to be careful as I walked into the yard with it. I found a clean spot, grabbed a hard stick from the ground, and slowly pried the casing open. Thomas's design was simple, thankfully. Inside I found exactly what I expected, a mixture of sulfur, saltpeter, and charcoal, plus a spring-loaded striker mechanism that detonated on impact. Once I had it open and understood the construction, the danger was manageable. I called Lundo over and pointed at the powder. He told me his grandfather always worked on these things in a private workshop away from the village, full of strange bottles and equipment with terrible smells. Lundo had only been inside once. After Thomas died, nobody touched the place. The villagers were too scared, and Lundo didn't dare mess with any of it. My heart raced. A workshop full of chemical equipment, raw materials, and the accumulated knowledge of an engineer-turned-alchemist. That was exactly what I needed. I told Lundo that if he ever went back to his village, I wanted to come along and see that workshop. I might be able to not only recreate these bombs, but make them safer and far more powerful. Lundo said he wasn't going back anytime soon. He wanted to make something of himself first. When I pressed him, the real reason came out. He didn't even have money for the trip home. The kid couldn't even afford to fix his crumbling house. I gave him 10 gold coins on the spot. His jaw dropped. He'd never seen that much money in his life. I told him to fix the house before it collapsed on him in his sleep, then gathered up the gunpowder components and headed home. Back at the house, I needed fire to test the powder's quality. My waterproof matches had been claimed by Lena for playing, so I went to the kitchen where Fei was cooking. Lena was there too, and I watched her demonstrate something impressive. She used her fire magic to light the cooking stove, chanting a quick spell that ignited the kindling with a small burst of flame. She was proud of her improving speed, but admitted she still wasn't fast enough. She explained that her teacher said if she could increase her casting speed, she'd have a real chance of beating her rival Shamanda in the upcoming tournament. Her magical power had grown significantly, and she'd already learned spells beyond her apprentice rank, but her control and speed were the bottleneck. I filed that information away carefully. Once I was alone by the stove, I wrapped a tiny pinch of gunpowder in paper and flicked it into the flames. A sharp hiss and a brilliant white flash erupted, much better quality than I'd expected. I muttered to myself that this would work perfectly for making bullets. Fei called from outside asking if the fire had gone out, since the cooking heat had dropped. I quickly shoved more wood into the stove and changed the subject. Over lunch, I kept thinking about Lena's problem. She needed faster casting speed. An idea was forming. I asked to borrow her staff for the afternoon, saying I wanted to play with it. She handed it over without question, trusting her big brother completely. I had a plan, and if it worked, it might give Lena the edge she needed. I took Lena's staff to a high-end magic shop to have the Wind Wolf crystal core embedded into it. The shop was run by elves, and seeing my first elf in person was something else entirely. The shopkeeper was a female elf named Lucy with green hair tied in a ponytail, delicate pointed ears, and the kind of effortless beauty that made it hard to look directly at her. Everything I'd heard about elven women being the most stunning creatures on the continent was apparently true. I told her I wanted to mount my own crystal into a staff. When she saw the level 5 Wind Wolf core, she was genuinely impressed. She said even their shop didn't carry anything like it. But then she looked at the staff and her expression changed completely. She recognized it as a basic apprentice-grade peachwood staff, the lowest tier available. She couldn't believe I was planning to put a priceless crystal into such a cheap weapon. I felt my face burn. The shopkeeper who'd sold me that staff had called it top quality for mages and charged me over 50 gold coins. I'd been completely scammed. Lucy was too polite to say it directly, but her meaning was clear. She recommended a magnificent firestone staff on display, carved from ancient fire spirit tree wood, enchanted by a grand mage and a senior enchanter, radiating red light, and covered in mystical rune carvings. It was clearly in a completely different league. It was also clearly in a completely different price range, one I couldn't afford. I put on my most dignified expression and told her that my sister had a deep emotional attachment to the peachwood staff, and I couldn't possibly replace it. Pure nonsense, but it let me save face. Lucy sighed and took both items to the back room. While I waited, a familiar face appeared from the back. Sulala, the pale pretty boy from the academy who was head over heels for a weir. Turns out this was his family's shop. He'd overheard about a customer mounting a level 5 crystal on a cheap staff and came out to investigate. When he recognized me, he was clearly trying to figure out what my relationship with a weir was, so he casually asked which lucky girl the staff was for. I told him it was for my sister. He immediately suggested we go together to cheer on a weir at the upcoming tournament. The guy was so obviously lovesick it was almost painful to watch. I decided I'd put him out of his misery eventually by making it clear a weir was taken, but for now I let him ramble. We chatted about the academy while I waited. He kept dropping a weir's name into every other sentence, sharing little stories about her, which I actually found interesting despite myself. Lucy finally emerged with the finished staff. The crystal was perfectly mounted into the handle, and the result was stunning. The cheap peachwood somehow looked mysterious and elegant with the glowing blue crystal set into it. The elf's craftsmanship had transformed a mediocre weapon into something beautiful. Even Sulala complimented her work. Then came the price. 10 gold coins for the mounting service. My stomach dropped. I'd burned through almost all my cash and didn't have my crystal card with me. I was frantically calculating whether to try bargaining or ask for credit when Sulala stepped in like a hero. He declared that since we were friends, I should only pay 1 gold coin as a tip for Lucy's labor. I nearly hugged the guy. I slapped a single gold coin into Lucy's hand and fled the shop before anyone could change their mind. Back home, I found Lena playing with little Tiger in the courtyard. I called her over and handed her the upgraded staff. Her eyes went wide when she saw the blue crystal embedded in the handle. I told her it was the same Wind Wolf crystal I'd shown a weir months ago, the one that increases casting speed. Since faster casting was exactly what she needed to beat Shamanda in the tournament, it belonged on her staff. Lena's face lit up like the sun. She immediately chanted a fireball spell and launched it at the courtyard wall. The fireball was noticeably faster and more powerful than before, streaking through the air with a long tail of flame and exploding in a shower of sparks. She started jumping around me, laughing and shouting that she wasn't afraid of Shamanda anymore. Her casting speed had improved dramatically just from that one crystal. Watching my little sister that happy made everything worth it. The embarrassment at the shop, getting ripped off on the original staff, even nearly going broke. Being a big brother had its rewards.